You know, every day here on the Thom Hartmann Program, Louise and I and our team, Sean, Nate, Shira, Dave, Chase, Sue, Nigel, Ron, we all work to put together the very, very best show we possibly can. And there's an enormous amount of work that goes into the show. And one of the things that comes out of that is a lot of content, a lot of specific information that we go through and we dig out and, you know, we want to share with you. And Sue puts that into our newsletter every week. And I think you will, if you don't already receive our newsletter, it comes in email every day, about an hour after we're off the air, or maybe a couple hours after we're off the air. And Sue goes through and pulls it literally every link to every story that we talked about and puts it into the newsletter. It's free. We don't sell a list or anything. You complete safety and security. There's no charge. There's no nothing. Just, plug in your email address over at thomhartmann.com. And you get signed up for the newsletter. It's all fairly obvious. You'll see it on the website. So check it out, thomhartmann.com. Thank you. The Mueller report, this is page 41, dissemination of the hacked materials. They're talking about the GRU, which is the Russian Secret Service or its equivalent. The GRU began planning the releases at least as early as April 19th, 2016, when Unit 26165 registered the domain dcleaks.com through a service that anonymized the registrant. Unit 26165 paid for the registration using a pool of Bitcoin that it had mined. The dcleaks.com landing page pointed to different tranches of stolen documents arranged by victim or subject matter. Other dcleaks.com pages contained indexes of the stolen emails that were being released, bearing the sender, recipient, and date of the email. To control access and the timing of releases, pages were sometimes password protected for a period of time and later made unrestricted to the public. Starting in June 2016, the GRU posted stolen documents onto the website dcleaks.com, including documents stolen from a number of individuals associated with the Clinton campaign. These documents appeared to have originated from the personal email accounts, in particular Google and Microsoft accounts, rather than the DNC and DCCC computer networks. DC Leaks victims included an advisor to the Clinton campaign, a former DNC employee and Clinton campaign employee, and 4 other campaign volunteers. The GRU released through dcleaks.com thousands of documents, including personal identifying and financial information, internal correspondence related to the Clinton campaign and prior political jobs, and fundraising files and information. Page 42. GRU officers operated a Facebook page under the DC Leaks moniker, which they primarily used to promote releases of materials. The Facebook page was administered through a small number of pre-existing GRU-controlled Facebook accounts. GRU officers also used the DC Leaks Facebook account, the Twitter account @DCLeaks, and the email account dcleaksproject@gmail.com to communicate privately with reporters and other U.S. persons. GRU officers using the DC Leaks persona gave certain reporters early access to archives of leaked files by sending them links and passwords to pages on the dcleaks.com website that had not yet become public. For example, on the July 14, 2016, GRU officers operating under the DC Leaks persona sent a link and password for a non-public DC Links webpage to a U.S. reporter via the Facebook account. Similarly, on September 14, 2016, GRU officers sent reporters Twitter direct messages from @DCLinks_ with a password to another non-public part of the DC Leaks website. The DC Leaks website, dcleaks.com website, remained operational and public until March of 2017. Item number 2, Guccifer 2.0. On June 14, 2016, the DNC and its cyber response team announced the breach of the DNC network and suspected theft of DNC documents. In the statements, the cyber response team alleged that Russian state-sponsored actors, which they referred to as Fancy Bear, were responsible for the breach. Apparently, in response to that announcement, on June 15, 2016, GRU officers using the persona Guccifer 2.0 created a WordPress blog. In the hours leading up to the launch of that WordPress blog, GRU officers logged into a Moscow-based server used and managed by Unit 74455 and searched for a number of specific words and phrases in English, including, quote, some hundred sheets, quote, Illuminati, and, quote, worldwide known. Approximately 2 hours after the last of those searches, Guccifer 2.0 published its first post, attributing the DNC server hack to a lone Romanian hacker and using several of the unique English words and phrases that the GRU officers had searched for that day. Page 43. That same day, June 15, 2016, the GRU also used the Guccifer 2.0 WordPress blog to begin releasing to the public documents stolen from the DNC and DCCC computer networks. The Guccifer 2.0 persona ultimately released thousands of documents stolen from the DNC and DCCC in a series of blog posts between June 15, 2016 and October 18, 2016. Released documents included opposition research performed by the DNC, including a memorandum analyzing potential criticisms of candidate Trump, internal policy documents, such as recommendations on how to address politically sensitive issues, analysis of specific congressional races, and fundraising documents. Releases were organized around thematic issues, such as specific states, e.g. Florida and Pennsylvania, that were perceived as competitive in the 2016 U.S. presidential election. Beginning in late June 2016, the GRU also used the Guccifer 2.0 persona to release documents directly to reporters and other interested individuals. Specifically, on June 27, 2016, Guccifer 2.0 sent an email to the news outlet The Smoking Gun, offering to provide, quote,
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
And greetings, my friends, patriots, lovers of democracy, truth, and justice, believers in peace, freedom, and the American way. Thom Hartmann here with you. Shabbat Shalom, Juma Mubarak, TGIF, whatever it may be for you. And a special tip of the hat and many, many thanks to Jefferson Smith, who did, from all the tweets and messages and whatnot I've been getting, an absolutely spectacular job of filling in for me over the last 2 days. Thank you, Jefferson. Wow. Congressman Ro Khanna will be with us for the second hour today, taking your calls. Otherwise, it's Anything Goes Friday. He's our only guest today. And so, you know, whatever's on your mind, feel free to give us a shout at 202-808-9925, whatever you'd like to talk about. Obviously, a couple of the two major issues, well, I guess the three major issues of the day right now. Number one, the abortion law that was passed in Alabama, the one that was previously passed in Georgia that provides for the death penalty for women who get an abortion, the one in Alabama that provides for 99 years in prison for the doctors, et cetera, number one. Number two, Donald Trump and Iran. This looks like this could very easily become a World War I kind of scenario where things just, you know, some little incident happens in World War I. It was the assassination of Archduke Ferdinand, and it just spirals out of control. And then the third, I think, big story that is pretty much not being covered by the corporate media, the mainstream media at all, is the fact, Kamala Harris actually tweeted about this yesterday. It was one of the few mentions I saw of it, that Mitch McConnell has just come right out and said he is not going to allow any legislation to pass the Senate this year that would secure our election systems against hacking by foreign governments. I'm guessing that, you know, McConnell thinks that between Russia, Israel, Saudi Arabia, China, you know, countries that have relationships, shall we say, with Donald Trump and members of his administration, that there's probably more countries who will hack us to make Trump president again than there are countries that will not hack us to make Trump president again. So anyhow, we'll see where that goes. I wrote an article yesterday afternoon. I'm feeling better, by the way. Thank you for, you know, a number of people, you know, sent nice regards and things. Turns out I'm pretty sure I had norovirus, which is this kind of 2-day stomach flu kind of thing that typically people get on cruise ships. I wasn't that lucky. But anyhow, that's what I think it was. I was pretty sick. You know, it's good for losing weight, I can tell you that. You don't eat for 2 days. But anyhow, yesterday afternoon, I wrote an op-ed, which is going to go up today. I'm not sure exactly where. We're submitting it through the Independent Media Institute to, you know, all the usual suspects, you know, Alternet, Raw Story, Slate, Common Dreams, and you know, we'll see where it shows up, and I'll let you know as the day goes on. But I just wanted to share it with you. I'm going to more or less read/perform it for you, as it were, because it's well, I think it's important. It's called the GOP's Commission for Virtue. And the Republican Party's Commission for the Promotion of Virtue and the Prevention of Vice is on its way. Now, if that phrase sounds familiar to you, you'll find out why in just a moment. During Mike Pence's first year as the governor of Indiana, his state put a young woman in prison for having a miscarriage, alleging that she'd taken an abortion-causing drug. Her name was Purvi Patel, and she didn't have a trace of such a drug in her system, but Pence's state sentenced her to 20 years in prison anyway. Just a few years earlier, Indiana had also held Bai Bai Shuai, who was a Chinese immigrant, for 435 days in the brutal maximum security Marion prison, facing 45 years to life for trying to kill herself, and in the process causing the death of her 33-week fetus. Utah charged 28-year-old Melissa Ann Rowland with murder because she refused a C-section, preferring vaginal birth for her twins. One of them died. 16-year-old Rennie Gibbs was charged by the state of Mississippi with depraved heart murder when her baby was born dead because his umbilical cord was wrapped around his neck. Her crime was that she had cocaine in her bloodstream, according to prosecutors. Angela Carter was ordered to have a C-section to deliver her baby before she died of cancer, she being Angela. Both she and the baby died from the procedure. These cases have exploded in recent years as the GOP and the nation's law enforcement system have embraced the American, and I put this in quotes, Christian version of fundamentalist Islamic law that dictates that women are the property of men and that women's principal purpose for existence is reproduction. According to Duke University's Journal of Health, Politics, and Law, there were 413 documented and probably thousands of lesser-known cases of women being prosecuted for having miscarriages or attempted abortions between the time Roe v. Wade became law of the land in '73 and 2005. Between 2005 and 2014, the Guttmacher Institute documented another 380 cases like the ones I just told you about. Georgia just passed a law signed by Republican Brian Kemp, the guy who ran his own election against Stacey Abrams, which puts any woman in that state who has a miscarriage at risk of 30 years to the death penalty. Other states are in line, and in those states like Georgia with the death penalty, many are proposing legislation to put women who have abortions to death. And we know what happens when abortion is totally banned. Romania, with a population slightly smaller than Florida, banned abortion. Although, unlike Alabama, they actually allowed a provision for rape, incest, and congenital abnormalities. Romania banned abortion in 1966. While wealthy Romanian women were still able to get abortions by traveling to other nearby states, that option was not available to poor women. At least 10,000 women died of botched illegal abortions, and that's the official number. The real number is probably 10 times that before Nicolae Ceausescu was deposed and the law was repealed. Few families in Romania were spared. Maternal death was higher than any other country in Europe by a factor of 10. And poverty exploded. When Romania was open to the world, over 170,000 children were found languishing in brutal orphanages, ignored, emaciated, and handcuffed to cribs. Nobody knows how many died in the decades before that. When Nicolae Ceausescu was deposed in 1989, his own soldiers gleefully machine-gunned him and his wife to death. The same penalty that Georgia would inflict on its women who get abortions. Given that 1 out of 4 pregnancies ends in miscarriage, laws like Georgia's and Alabama's may well require a substantial addition to our police systems. I mean, after all, who's going to monitor all those pregnancies? Who's going to examine the women and the remains of their miscarriages to make sure there wasn't a drug or a self-inflicted injury involved? Who's going to make sure that women who are pregnant are immediately brought to the attention of the authorities if they're reluctant to do it themselves? When Governor Mike Pence proudly signed Indiana's abortion restrictions in 2016, women across that state noted that the new law required that miscarried fetuses, along with aborted fetuses, be, quote, buried in a cemetery or cremated, no matter whether the pregnancy was 6 or 16 weeks along when the miscarriage happened. It led to a movement across Indiana called Periods for Pence, in which women tweeted or called the governor's office to tell him when their periods had started and ended so that the state wouldn't mistake a normal menstrual period for a miscarriage. The press treated it as funny at the time. Nobody's laughing now. The Republicans could borrow the name from Saudi Arabia for their police who scour the streets looking for badly behaving women. The Commission for the Promotion of Virtue and the Prevention of Vice could hire a few million upright Christian men who would each take responsibility for monitoring the menstrual cycles of, say, 50 or 100 women per man. Like in Saudi Arabia, it'd be a real job creator. It would boost the economy while ensuring public morality, right? Thanks to the internet, each woman who's a ward of a particular commissioner could use modern technology to keep it all simple, like the Saudi Abshur app that women use in that country to obtain a man's permission to leave the house or date. American women could simply swipe period started and period finished normally when those events happen. This way, the commissioners could limit the unpleasant work of physically checking women's uteruses or showing up with a pregnancy test. They could limit that to only once a year. Although, more frequently for high-risk women, less frequently for low-risk women, and no doubt Facebook would be happy to help out with a handy algorithm based on women's online activity. Seriously, Louise and I had 3 children and 1 miscarriage, which was an emotionally gutting experience. I can't imagine, and this is not what I wrote, I'm just adding this, I just can't imagine if we had to report that miscarriage to the police, if Louise had to go, or the 2 of us had to go report it, if we had been forced by the state to have a funeral, or, I mean, it pains me even to write this article, and particularly to present the idea above. But if the Republican Party keeps going down this road, this may very well be where we end up. The Republican Commission for Virtue, for the promotion of virtue and the prevention of vice. So anyhow, that's what I've got, and for some reason, I'm seeing all kinds of. Geez, this is fascinating. Nick, I'm going to restart my my call screen software because it's not showing I have any calls, and I know that I do. So let's see if we can pick up some callers here on Anything Goes Friday and roll on with the show. There we go. Mike in Palatine, Illinois. Hey, Mike, what's on your mind today?
Hey, what's going on, Tom? You know what? I wish someone would have asked any of the Alabama Republicans, if a fetus is considered a child, then why isn't a pregnant woman counted as 2 people in census? But of course they don't.
Why is a pregnant woman what? I'm sorry, say that again.
Counted as 2 people in a census.
Oh, well, they're proposing that in some of these laws. I believe the Alabama law specifically proposes that. There's a fascinating little thread over on Democratic Underground that speaks, right to this actual very issue where they're asking. And I thought I had printed it out. I don't see it now. Oh, here I've got it. This is pretty. This is pretty amazing. Dan Mell posted this. This is like, questions to the Republicans, right? Will you ensure that my body gets the prenatal care it needs to make sure this embryo grows into a healthy fetus? Will you ensure that my host body gets paid family leave so I can care for the baby that you said I have to have no matter what? Will you ensure that my baby will be able to see a doctor after it leaves my host body? Will you ensure that my baby can breathe clean air and drink clean water after my host body isn't providing its oxygen and its milk? Will you make sure my baby has quality child care and early childhood education because my host body sometimes has to go to work? And it goes on, it's...
Republicans are pro-birth. They're not pro-life. They just want you to have the baby.
Well, and if you look at the origins of this, and I was digging into this for my book on voting, back in the 19th and early 20th centuries, the anti-abortion laws were aggressively promoted against white women, but ignored for black women.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
And that tells you everything you need to know about where this all came from. Mike, thanks a lot for the call. We'll be right back. And welcome back. Jeanette in Richland Center, Wisconsin, watching us on Free Speech TV. Hey, Jeanette, what's on your mind today?
I'm not so informed on this, so you can help me, but I just caught a snippet of information that bothered me, that political leaders had met together to have a Christchurch memorandum to take and face cyber hate groups. And meet that as a group together, and Trump turned it down.
That's correct.
Saying that it would be an infringement on the First Amendment when he has done everything he can to destroy free speech by calling our reporters, what did he, fake news and enemies of the people. Right. Am I off on this too much, or what didn't I hear in the news?
This was an international effort. I believe it was organized by the UN or one of the parts of the UN, but I'd have to go back and read the story again. And it was called by, I'm not sure if her title is Prime Minister or President Ahern, the woman who runs, who is the elected head of New Zealand. And it basically called upon all of the various large platforms, and smaller ones as well. I mean, it was calling on individual countries to consider legislation, but and also just the moral request that they please shut down hate speech on their platforms, specifically anti-racial hate speech. That is, race speech, hate speech against racial groups, hate speech against gay people, hate speech against Semites, against Jews and Muslims. Basically any kind of hate speech that they put the cork on it. And all these other countries said, yeah, cool, we'll do that. And Trump's America said no. So, Jeanette, you nailed it. Jeanette, thank you very much for the call. John in Los Angeles. Hey, John, thanks for listening to KPFK. What's up?
Yes, I understand your disdainment for the evangelical understanding. And here's the thing that gets me, is the evangelicals that's doing this, but ain't none of them reading their Bibles right at all, because we're not supposed to treat each other like that.
You're right.
And we don't treat women like that. You read the Bible, and I mean really read it, it doesn't say that.
Well, yeah, and go back and read Hebrews. There was a woman who who had sex with a man who wasn't her husband. She became pregnant. God told, I forget who it was, told one of the prophets or patriarchs or kings or whatever to give her a potion to cause her to abort. God ordered an abortion because this woman engaged in infidelity. I mean, that's right there in the Old Testament. This is like, really?
I mean, the evangelicals are really, and my thing is, I'm scared because once they do this with that, I know where they're going next. As a black male, and they've already begun to prove it by gunning us down in the street.
Yeah. Well, I think the place they're going next is birth control.
Going next.
The place they're going next is birth control, John. And like I said before the break, in the South, the anti-abortion laws were aggressively enforced with regard to white people. They wanted to increase the white population, but they turned a complete blind eye to anti-abortion laws when it came to black people. So, it's kind of the opposite of what is being pitched as abortion as, racial genocide. It was really racial promotion, and that's what it still is for white people. John, thank you for the call. Good to hear from you. We'll be right back. It's 22 minutes past the hour. And welcome back. Anything Goes Friday here on the Thom Hartmann Program. Donald in Los Angeles. Hey, Donald, what's up?
Hi. Wanted to talk about writing in Bernie Sanders if necessary and getting him on the ballot by the people in every state possible, and why I think that's a good idea.
Okay. Why do you think? If he doesn't get the nomination, why would it be a good idea to write his name in so that your vote would count for Donald Trump? I don't get it.
It doesn't count for Donald Trump.
Well, it doesn't count at all, basically. I mean, why would you waste a vote?
Wait a minute. You asked, let me tell you, I'm an independent, okay? Now, I personally happen not to support Donald Trump at all, but how do you know that a particular independent out there doesn't support Donald Trump more than they support the Democratic Party's nominee? When you talk about splitting the vote and saying independents should vote for whoever the party's nominated, then you're telling a lot of independents to vote for Donald Trump. Is that what you want to do?
That is not what I'm telling independents, Donald. You're trying to do some sort of weird double twist logic reverse, which is total BS. The fact of the matter is that we have a first past the post, winner take all system. There are 7 countries in the world that have this. 2 of them have instant runoff voting, New Zealand and Australia. To get around that, everybody else has proportional representation, where you can have multiple parties, and you can actually have independent voters, or you can have people who are aligned with small parties but still have representation. In the United States, you have a choice of 2 parties. If you want to be an independent, you're simply marginalizing yourself. Now, if you want to self-marginalize, Donald, you're welcome to do that, but I would say at this point in this nation's history, that's probably not a good idea.
Not listening to me.
What are you talking about?
Well, I've been trying to correct you on a couple of things, and apparently you couldn't hear me at all. I don't know if your system doesn't allow the audio to go both ways or not, or what. But my point was that you were strawmanning me. And yes,
I'm not strawmanning you, Donald. This is the actual way it is.
The way it has been, the way we're told that it is not the way it has to be. The people can put a candidate on the ballot. And if the people work hard and they get a candidate on the ballot in enough states to make that candidate a viable possibility, or if the people are willing to get out.
How did that work out for John Anderson? How did that work out for Ross Perot? How did that work out for Teddy Roosevelt in 1912?
They weren't Bernie Sanders.
Donald, you're in La La Land. Margie in Wisconsin Rapids. Hey, Margie, what's on your mind today?
I have a question regarding these forced birth laws that do not allow exceptions for rape and incest. And that is, do those states still allow the rapists to sue for parental rights? And the reason I'm asking this is I personally know a woman, and this is in the state of Wisconsin, who did bear her rapist child. He went to prison for her rape, and she was court-ordered by family court to transport the son, the product of this rape, to prison for routine scheduled visitations.
Oh, geez.
This went on for 18 years. She was not allowed to move out of state because it would have interfered with his parental rights.
Yeah, that's so bizarre as to sound apocryphal, but I've seen several stories in the press recently of just that, or variations on that. And yeah, I mean, if we're going to turn into, Margaret Atwood's America, there's a lot of different laws that are going to have to be changed, including, as I said, what kind of police powers are going to be necessary in order to police and keep track of women's periods and things. Margie, it's a horrible, horrible story. Thank you for sharing that.
You're listening to the Thom Hartmann Program. Call 202-808-9925.
I don't mean thank you for sharing a horrible story. I mean thank you for informing us about the horrors of this story. We'll be right back with your calls. It's Anything Goes Friday. The Mueller report, this is page 41, dissemination of the hacked materials. They're talking about the GRU, which is the Russian Secret Service or its equivalent. The GRU began planning the releases at least as early as April 19th, 2016, when Unit 26165 registered the domain dcleaks.com through a service that anonymized the registrant. Unit 26165 paid for the registration using a pool of Bitcoin that it had mined. The dcleaks.com landing page pointed to different tranches of stolen documents arranged by victim or subject matter. Other dcleaks.com pages contained indexes of the stolen emails that were being released, bearing the sender, recipient, and date of the email. To control access and the timing of releases, pages are sometimes password protected for a period of time and later made unrestricted to the public. Starting in June 2016, the GRU posted stolen documents onto the website dcleaks.com, including documents stolen from a number of individuals associated with the Clinton campaign. These documents appeared to have originated from the personal email accounts, in particular Google and Microsoft accounts, rather than the DNC and DCCC computer networks. DC Leaks victims included an advisor to the Clinton campaign, a former DNC employee and Clinton campaign employee, and 4 other campaign volunteers. The GRU released through dcleaks.com thousands of documents, including personal identifying and financial information, internal correspondence related to the Clinton campaign and prior political jobs, and fundraising files and information. Page 42. GRU officers operated a Facebook page under the DC Leaks moniker, which they primarily used to promote releases of materials. The Facebook page was administered through a small number of pre-existing GRU-controlled Facebook accounts. GRU officers also used the DC Leaks Facebook account, the Twitter account @DCLeaks, and the email account dcleaksproject@gmail.com to communicate privately with reporters and other U.S. persons. GRU officers, using the DC Leaks persona, gave certain reporters early access to archives of leaked files by sending them links and passwords to pages on the DCLeaks.com website that had not yet become public. For example, on the July 14, 2016, GRU officers operating under the DC Leaks persona sent a link and password for a non-public DC Links webpage to a U.S. reporter via the Facebook account. Similarly, on September 14, 2016, GRU officers sent reporters Twitter direct messages from @DCLinks_ with a password to another non-public part of the DC Leaks website. The DC Leaks website, DCLeaks.com website, remained operational and public until March of 2017. Item number 2, Guccifer 2.0. On June 14, 2016, the DNC and its cyber response team announced the breach of the DNC network and suspected theft of DNC documents. In the statements, the cyber response team alleged that Russian state-sponsored actors, which they referred to as Fancy Bear, were responsible for the breach. Apparently, in response to that announcement, on June 15, 2016, GRU officers using the persona Guccifer 2.0 created a WordPress blog. In the hours leading up to the launch of that WordPress blog, GRU officers logged into a Moscow-based server used and managed by Unit 74455 and searched for a number of specific words and phrases in English, including, quote, some hundred sheets, quote, Illuminati, and, quote, worldwide known. Approximately 2 hours after the last of those searches, Guccifer 2.0 published its first post, attributing the DNC server hack to a lone Romanian hacker and using several of the unique English words and phrases that the GRU officers had searched for that day. Page 43. That same day, June 15, 2016, the GRU also used the Guccifer 2.0 WordPress blog to begin releasing to the public documents stolen from the DNC and DCCC computer networks. The Guccifer 2.0 persona ultimately released thousands of documents stolen from the DNC and DCCC in a series of blog posts between June 15, 2016 and October 18, 2016. Released documents included opposition research performed by the DNC, including a memorandum analyzing potential criticisms of candidate Trump, internal policy documents such as recommendations on how to address politically sensitive issues, analysis of specific congressional races, and fundraising documents. Releases were organized around thematic issues such as specific states, e.g. Florida and Pennsylvania, that were perceived as competitive in the 2016 U.S. presidential election. Beginning in late June 2016, the GRU also used the Guccifer 2.0 persona to release documents directly to reporters and other interested individuals. Specifically, on June 27, 2016, Guccifer 2.0 sent an email to the news outlet The Smoking Gun, offering to provide, quote, exclusive access to some leaked emails linked to Hillary Clinton's staff, end quote. The GRU later sent the reporter a password and link to a locked portion of the DCLeaks.com website that contained an archive of emails stolen by Unit 26165 from a Clinton campaign volunteer in March of 2016. That the Guccifer 2.0 persona provided reporters access to a restricted portion of the DC Leaks website tends to indicate that both personas were operated by the same or a closely related group of people. The GRU continued its release efforts through Guccifer 2.0 into August of 2016. It's the Mueller Report.
Want to connect with the show online? You can find the Thom Hartmann Program on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram.
Soon on our book tour for the Hidden History Amendment. I'll be in New York, Washington, D.C., Portland, Los Angeles, Seattle, San Francisco, Chicago, and Minneapolis. Here I come. More information is available at thomhartmann.com. We got a book tour coming up early. Well, actually, the first 3 weeks of June, basically. I'm going to be all over the country. You can get all the dates and places and times and everything at thomhartmann.com. Apropos of the abortion debate, Steve tweets me, Tom, should pregnant women get 2 votes in the next election? Well, arguably, you've got to be 21, so no, I don't think so, because fetuses aren't. Gary, though, gets to the issue that I was bringing up, which is how are you going to police these kinds of things, particularly if, like, you know, Mike Pence's law in Indiana, which said that a miscarriage has to have a funeral, which is great for funeral homes, but, you know, not great for anybody else. And so Gary says, I see a new app coming. All women must register with selective periods, sort of like the selective service. What day do you expect to menstruate? Did you menstruate? Did you menstruate last month? On what day? How much did you spend on napkins? Do you have receipts? See, this is where, you know, Amazon could help out, right? Hey, so-and-so, Sally over here just, you know, didn't reorder her sanitary napkins. There's something going on. Hey, Georgia police. Rick in Brooklyn, Maryland. Hey, Rick, what's on your mind today?
Oh, hey, Tom. Or am I talking to Fred Flintstone?
Yeah, all of the above, I guess.
I just want to, now correct me if I'm wrong. I saw a clip where the so-called governor of Georgia, when he signed their anti-choice law into effect, said a lot of people were going to be against it, but it's the right thing to do. Did he do the right thing when he should have resigned from as Secretary of the state of Georgia to run as governor?
Well, I mean, he never should have rigged the election. He shouldn't have thrown over 1 million people off the voting rolls. He shouldn't have supervised his own election. And you know, in terms of signing the bill, I think, obviously, I think that was the wrong thing. Was that a rhetorical question, Rick?
He's showing the hypocrisy of the Republican Party.
Yeah, he does. And you know, and they don't care. The Republicans don't care. As long as they get what they want, they don't care how they get it.
It's the do as I say and not as I do mentality.
Yeah, absolutely. Rick, well said. Thank you. Mike, is it Azle, Texas, A-Z-L-E?
Azle.
Azle. Hey, Rick, what's up? Or Mike, excuse me. Hey, Mike, what's up?
I just wanted to say that I believe that the Republicans are so used to cheating in elections, okay, that they don't want to say anything about these Russians because they're afraid if they put too much control on elections that they're going to get caught for the cheating that they do in elections.
Oh, I think they're absolutely hoping that the Russians will repeat what they did in 2016 and you know, get Donald Trump reelected. Whether that was actual hacking or whether that was just, you know, social media messing around, whatever it may be. And by the way, we don't know if there were other countries involved as well. We do know that, you know, Donald Trump and Benjamin Netanyahu worked together to get each other elected, or at least, you know, Trump to get Netanyahu elected. And we know that Mohammed bin Salman, who doesn't have to stand for election because he's an absolute monarchical line of, you know, lineage dictator, you know, is very interested in helping out Trump, presumably. So, you know, we just don't know what's going on.
Yeah. Well,
and Mitch McConnell says we will not be allowed to know, and we're not going to try and stop anybody this time around. Excuse me, Mike.
Well, during the Bush-Gore election, if you remember, back during their election, okay, Gore was actually winning in Florida.
Yep.
And there was a story out that night that the Bush brothers got in a fight down there in Austin with each other. And then all of a sudden, the next day, you know, they come up with the hanging Chad deal and all that kind of stuff. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And then it turned around and Bush won Florida. And I just, you know, I think it's a travesty that this kind of stuff is allowed.
Oh, it is. The Florida Constitution requires that when any election that's within 0.5% has to have an automatic recount. So the state of Florida's Supreme Court, the Florida Supreme Court, ordered an automatic recount. And that was when all these lobbyists and staff members, mostly from Tom DeLay's office, and Brett Kavanaugh and John Roberts went down to Florida and did the whole Brooks Brothers riot and you know, and took this to the Supreme Court. The Supreme Court stopped that recount from happening when so this consortium of news agencies got a hold of all of the ballots, loaded them up into trailer trucks, took them up to New York City, counted them for the entire year of 2001, and in November of 2001 published an article, 2002. Yeah, no, it was 2000. Yeah, it was the month after 2001. So it must have been December of 2001. They published an article that, by any measure, no matter how you counted it, hanging chads, pregnant chads, you know, missing chads, intent to vote or not intent, however you measured it, Al Gore actually won Florida. But they buried that in the 17th paragraph because 9/11 had just happened, and they didn't want to diminish the, you know, credibility of George Bush during a time of national crisis. But absolutely, the Supreme Court stole that election.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, I just, I don't know. I think it's time for people just to stand up and say enough's enough of this stuff.
Yeah, I'm with you, Mike. I'm absolutely with you. Thanks a lot for the call. Erica in Albuquerque, New Mexico. Hey, Erica, what's up?
Hi, Tom. Great respect. First of all, I just wanted to let you know that I got about 30-some years experience with this abortion debate. I grew up in a pro-life in a very Catholic family in Wichita, Kansas during the Randall Terry days.
Oh, my.
So while I am no longer pro-life, I remember kind of being drug along to rallies. I had an uncle who literally chained himself to the doors of George Tiller's abortion clinic to try to keep it from opening in the day. And, of course, we know what happened there. Years later, George Tiller was killed walking out of church with his family.
Right after about the 25th time Bill O'Reilly called him Tiller the baby killer.
Yeah. So all that said, I moved away from Kansas as a young adult just to get away from all the toxicity and, came to my own understanding and my own beliefs. Now I completely support a woman's right to choose, and I have for most of my life once I got out of that bubble. But what I'm saying is being around that bubble and how most of the people in my family haven't changed. They've never even left that little bubble very much to ever experience anything else. Mm-hmm. And truthfully, when we talk about coat hanger abortions and protecting women, do you realize that they don't care if we die? They actually think that was like, oh, well, that's a consequence of you having sex.
Yeah.
But the thing is that they're all hypocrites because my mother had many children in her family, I think 8 girls, and I can speak to the fact that I know that I was conceived before my mom was married. A lot of my cousins were too. And, this whole, sex is only for marriage and we don't believe in birth control and all of that. That's always bothered me too because they all supposedly practice is it called the Caressa method? I forget what it is, but basically they count the days on the calendar when they, shouldn't have sex because they don't want to get
we used
pregnant.
to call it the rhythm method when I was a kid.
Tom, isn't that playing God? You don't want to take birth control because you say that you're trying to play God as to getting pregnant or not. But if you're counting days, trying not to get pregnant on certain days, you're still playing God. It's just a different, riskier method. So the hypocrisy is, I've just had it. I've had it up to here. I'm sure people in this town are hearing my voice and saying, oh, my God, I can't believe she's actually coming out against this. But I've had it, and I am saying what I think. We are in danger. Women are going to die. They don't care because that's less people at the polls, and they'll finally have their wish to make this a religious state instead of a free one. And thank you for your time, and I respect you so much.
You're welcome. Thank you, Erica, and thank you for sharing that story. I would submit to you that women are already dying. There are large chunks of this country, probably a majority of this country, where the nearest abortion clinic is hundreds of miles away, where the states have imposed requirements that make it very difficult or very expensive for a woman to get an abortion. Women are once again doing back alley abortions. Women are doing, do-it-yourself abortifacients. Some of the search engine companies have talked about this. We're not seeing these being widely reported. I'm just, pretty soon we're going to start seeing that. It's my absolute prediction. You're going to start hearing reports about women dying from do-it-yourself abortions. Erica, thank you for sharing your story with us. I appreciate it.
Absolutely, Tom. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Good talking with you. Gail in Antelope, California. Hey, Gail, what's up?
Oh, I am on a rant.
Okay, go for it.
Okay. In this, I'm 75, so I've seen a lot about this debate with abortions and pregnancy, and there's something that I have not heard yet from any of the pro-life, and they're not really pro-life people. They keep saying women get pregnant. That is not true. Women do not get pregnant. They become pregnant when a man impregnates them.
Right.
You never hear any of these pro-life people speak about the role that men play in creating unwanted babies and unwanted life that ends in abortions. Abortions could be ended today with 3 steps. No sperm, no baby, no abortion. And this business about perverting the sanctity of life in the womb, these same hypocrites think absolutely nothing when those same babies are slaughtered by crazy people with AK-47s, where all they have to offer is their thoughts and their prayers. So this hypocrisy crap has got to come to an end. If anybody thinks this is a moral issue, they're wrong. This has nothing to do with morality. Those people can't even spell the word moral. This has to do with creating a standing labor pool of cheap labor and cannon fodder for their miserable wars that they profit from.
Well, and you've got a couple of religions that forbid abortion because they want to try and outnumber each other. By the way, you know, up until the last maybe 20, 30 years, it was fairly difficult to know absolute paternity. I mean, you could test blood types, but, you know, DNA tests are quite recent. They're pretty much, you know, certainly in my lifetime, just in the last generation or two. So now we have the ability, which you didn't have in biblical times, and you didn't have in early American times, and you didn't have through all the era of, you know, women as property and all that. Now we have the absolute ability with 100% certainty, or close enough, 99.999% certainty, to know who the father of a zygote, of a fetus, of a whatever it is. And so if Georgia is going to put a woman to death for having an abortion, that penalty should also apply to the man who impregnated her. And once you do that, suddenly all this is going to stop.
What would they do if they said to people who are rapists, men who are rapists and convicted of rape, I'm not talking about false accusations, but actual proven facts, or in the case of incest where a father has, impregnated his daughter against her will, what would they do if they said the mandatory penalty for that was actual surgical castration and removal of their penis?
Again, you would see all of these abortion laws suddenly fading into the background. Or but even if the man just went to prison, I mean, just send him to prison for however long you want to send women to prison. Privy Patel was sentenced to, what was it, 20 years, 40 years, whatever it was in Indiana. Mike Pence was governor when it happened. Nobody ever asked who the father was. You're absolutely right, Gail.
Those guys that are out there screaming about this, they love the fact that women have abortions because they don't want to support their mistresses' babies.
There you go.
They'll still keep getting abortions.
There you go. That's Donald Trump. Hang on just a second.
To Thom Hartmann. Visit ThomHartmann.com for audio and video archive.
You know, when Donald Trump found out that Marla Maples was pregnant, he talked with Howard Stern about how they were debating whether or not to have an abortion. I mean, that's amazing. Gail, thank you for the call. And welcome back. Tripper in Atlanta. Hey, Tripper, what's on your mind today?
Hey, I'm calling as a concerned resident of Georgia. And I also have a question about something you read a few weeks ago on the air. But first off, things like where Alyssa Milano was calling for women to just stop having sex. And she got a lot of backlash. People made fun of her for it. But I got to tell you, I feel like women have a legitimate reason to be afraid and to literally just do exactly that, just not have sex.
Well, yes, but rape and incest for that matter. I mean,
true. Rape,
which is also rape.
But I feel like it would still have an impact if there was plenty of if there was a growing number of women who, upon being asked at the club or being being approached at normal social situations, women are like, well, I'm actually taking a stand against having sex right now. And if enough women were giving that reply to men, I think it would start waking people up. And I think the fear is there to maybe even get that movement going. But I'm just spitballing on that one. Yeah. But on the front of other things, like I like seeing I just saw something with Jason Bateman, who films like 2 different shows here in this state. He's saying he doesn't want to do any more films here any more filming here if this continues. And there's like one more, like Jordan Peele, he was saying, I'll still film, but we're going to give the profits to groups that are fighting against this, like the ACLU and such. And I don't know if I agree with that one as much, because I feel like it's saying, oh, well, the jobs are more important than this, because he could film anywhere and still donate that money to the ACLU. You know what I mean?
Or Planned Parenthood. Planned Parenthood is really the one. They're the ones who are on the front lines on this. They're the ones who literally have guns pointed at them. And they're the ones who literally have been killed. And
I don't know if that's not one of the places he's donating to. I just didn't say. Yeah. But I just feel like it's saying, oh, jobs are more important. We don't want to take jobs away from people, so we'll still film in the state and get the tax credits for it. But and I just feel like and I'm not just saying this as who's a bystander, like a lot of my jobs are acting jobs, and it would affect me if people stopped filming here. But to me, it's more important to say, hey, let's take this billions of dollars of revenue that they get from all of these films that get filmed here and just stop filming here. And all of a sudden, you don't have that $2 billion windfall anymore.
Yeah.
And
at the end of the day, though, Tripper, it's not broadly. It's unless you've got somebody with a DiCaprio kind of star power. It's not going to be the actors who are going to be able to make those decisions. It's going to be the producers. It's going to be the people who own the shows.
That's what I'm saying.
Who are benefiting from the tax breaks, and they're mostly invisible.
Yeah.
I mean, nobody knows who those people are.
Yeah. But I mean, that's what I'm saying is, the people who produce these shows and such should pull out and, make a dent in, what they receive in funding from Hollywood,
Yeah.
But that aside, I want to ask you about something. You read something on the air. It was amazing, and I don't know where to find it. It was talking about how somebody who would be an otherwise good, person working in government, somebody who's a good-natured person, can incrementally become complicit in Trump's crimes. Do you remember reading about that? It was like step by step. It was like first you start out as just
Oh, that was James Comey's. That was James Comey's op-ed in the New York Times about 2 weeks ago.
Oh, okay, James Comey.
Yep.
Op-ed. That was great. I loved it. Thank you, Tom, so much.
Check it out. And at the very end, he's eating your soul. That was the very last sentence. Yeah, that's it. Yeah, that was James Comey, former FBI director. Tripper, thank you very much for the call. Good talking to you. We'll be back. It's 51 minutes past the hour. We'll be right back with more of your calls. Welcome back. Thom Hartmann here with you. Mark in Ann Arbor, Michigan. Hey, Mark, what's up?
Oh, hi. Good afternoon, Tom.
Hey.
I was going through my Netflix news queue just a while ago, and Lee Camp was reporting on the police in Washington, D.C., breaking into the Venezuelan embassy and arresting peace activists who were invited into the embassy by the Venezuelan government, the Maduro government. And I haven't seen anything else on any news about it, and I was wondering if you knew anything about this. Lee's a pretty straight shooter normally, and
Lee's a pretty solid guy. I haven't seen anything, and I've been watching the news fairly carefully the last couple of days, but it wouldn't surprise me at all. I mean, the position of the Trump administration is that they're not recognizing the Maduro government; they're recognizing the what's his name, say that the Guido,
the make-believe,
right? Yeah, the Speaker of the House, who never ran for president. They're saying he's the president, and a bunch of and when the Venezuelans, when the Maduro people, invited a bunch of American peace activists in, those people were holding press conferences and things, and it wouldn't surprise me at all. Let me see what I can find out during the break here in the next 7 minutes, Mark, and I'll bring it up in the third hour. We've got Congressman Khan is going to be taking calls the next hour. Thanks a lot, Mark. Good talking to you. Morris in Long Beach, California. Hey, Morris, thanks for listening to KPFK. What's up?
Today is the best day of your life.
Hey, every day is.
Are you with inherent contempt?
The other thing about every day is today is the youngest you'll ever be.
You got
for the rest of your life.
Hey, are you familiar with inherent contempt?
I am.
The vernacular. Okay, it's a congressional tool.
Yes.
That's used to coerce compliance with the congressional protocol.
That's right.
Here's what got my attention. I always thought that the sergeant of arms was not mobile, but I understand that he can come and pick you up. I don't know who gives him the directive, but he can leave that location and come and pick you up. Now, I got a question for you. What do you think would be most effective, for Mr. Trump to resign or to be impeached? And the reason why he might consider resignation is because let's say that his families and his friends are considering jail time, son, daughter-in-law, etc. Do you think that might be enough to have the man step down, or do you think his narcissistic behavior is so powerful that he would even go ahead and use them as collateral damage?
That's a serious, legitimate question, Morris, whether, Trump would give up his kids in order to have his own freedom. and to have his own, power and aggrandizement. And I honestly don't know how disgusting he is. I mean, I don't think that we've plumbed the depths of his soul yet. But the other point you bring up, not just with regard to inherent contempt, but with impeachment, is that from the statement that Nancy Pelosi made yesterday, that where the White House sent this document to Jerry Nadler saying that you may not investigate the president because there's no legitimate legislative function and you're the legislature. And she came out and she said one of our legitimate functions, which is in the Constitution, is impeachment. And prior to an impeachment, you have to investigate the facts that may necessitate the impeachment. And that's what we are doing right now. So she is putting markers on the table, saying right out loud, these are investigations preliminary to impeachment. And that's how she's presenting it to to courts right now. And that's a huge and serious step. I had been arguing for some time that they should actually open a hearing with the Judiciary Committee and call it an impeachment hearing. Nancy Pelosi is saying, no, Tom, you don't need to do that. You don't need to go that far. You can claim that any investigation you do that has the president at the, in it, around it, peripheral to it, is an investigation that may lead to impeachment. And impeachment gives Congress not just its normal powers, but also judicial powers. So, we'll see where this goes. But I think it's coming. Morris, thanks for the call. Janet in Tucson, Arizona. Janet, what's on your mind?
Hi, Tom. I wanted to know, how can Americans be assured in our 2020 election that our state voting machines have not been hacked into?
There's no way to know.
Can citizens demand a recount in states that do not have paper ballot backups?
No, they can't. There's no way to know. You can't demand a recount. You can't demand or require any state to prove to you that your vote was counted. The closest you can get to that is if you cast a provisional ballot, which automatically is not counted. You can go to the Secretary of State or to the local elections office and present your identification and make your case for why your vote should be counted, and they will eventually tell you whether or not they're going to count your vote, but they can't. They're not obligated to actually prove that to you. So no, the Supreme Court ruled in Bush v. Gore in 2001 that in January of 2001, that there is no constitutional right to vote for President of the United States. That's a verbatim quote from that Supreme Court decision. And therefore, you do not have those rights. Neither do I. And that's something that has to change, Janet. You put your finger on something really, really important. Thank you so much for the call, and thanks for watching us there on YouTube. We're going to be back with Congressman Ro Khanna for the next hour, taking your calls on whatever's on your mind. So if you're on hold and you can convert your question to a Khanna question, do it.
You're listening to Thom Hartmann.
We say fight back!
The Mueller report, this is page 41, dissemination of the hacked materials. They're talking about the GRU, which is the Russian Secret Service or its equivalent. The GRU began planning the releases at least as early as April 19th, 2016, when Unit 26165 registered the domain dcleaks.com through a service that anonymized the registrant. Unit 26165 paid for the registration using a pool of Bitcoin that it had mined. The dcleaks.com landing page pointed to different tranches of stolen documents arranged by victim or subject matter. Other DCLeaks.com pages contained indexes of the stolen emails that were being released, bearing the sender, recipient, and date of the email. To control access and the timing of releases, pages are sometimes password protected for a period of time and later made unrestricted to the public. Starting in June 2016, the GRU posted stolen documents onto the website DCLeaks.com, including documents stolen from a number of individuals associated with the Clinton campaign. These documents appeared to have originated from the personal email accounts, in particular Google and Microsoft accounts, rather than the DNC and DCCC computer networks. DCLeaks victims included an advisor to the Clinton campaign, a former DNC employee and Clinton campaign employee, and 4 other campaign volunteers. The GRU released through DCLeaks.com thousands of documents, including personal identifying and financial information, internal correspondence related to the Clinton campaign and prior political jobs, and fundraising files and information. Page 42. GRU officers operated a Facebook page under the DCLeaks moniker, which they primarily used to promote releases of materials. The Facebook page was administered through a small number of pre-existing GRU-controlled Facebook accounts. GRU officers also used the DCLeaks Facebook account, the Twitter account @DCLeaks, and the email account DCLeaksProject@gmail.com to communicate privately with reporters and other U.S. persons. GRU officers using the DCLeaks persona gave certain reporters early access to archives of leaked files by sending them links and passwords to pages on the DCLeaks.com website that had not yet become public. For example, on the July 14, 2016, GRU officers operating under the DCLeaks persona sent a link and password for a non-public DCLeaks webpage to a U.S. reporter via the Facebook account. Similarly, on September 14, 2016, GRU officers sent reporters Twitter direct messages from @DCLeaks_ with a password to another non-public part of the DCLeaks website. The DCLeaks.com website remained operational and public until March of 2017. Item number 2, Guccifer 2.0. On June 14, 2016, the DNC and its cyber response team announced the breach of the DNC network and suspected theft of DNC documents. In the statements, the cyber response team alleged that Russian state-sponsored actors, which they referred to as Fancy Bear, were responsible for the breach. Apparently, in response to that announcement, on June 15, 2016, GRU officers using the persona Guccifer 2.0 created a WordPress blog. In the hours leading up to the launch of that WordPress blog, GRU officers logged into a Moscow-based server used and managed by Unit 74455 and searched for a number of specific words and phrases in English, including, quote, some hundred sheets, quote, Illuminati, and, quote, worldwide known. Approximately 2 hours after the last of those searches, Guccifer 2.0 published its first post, attributing the DNC server hack to a lone Romanian hacker and using several of the unique English words and phrases that the GRU officers had searched for that day. Page 43. That same day, June 15, 2016, the GRU also used the Guccifer 2.0 WordPress blog to begin releasing to the public documents stolen from the DNC and DCCC computer networks. The Guccifer 2.0 persona ultimately released thousands of documents stolen from the DNC and DCCC in a series of blog posts between June 15, 2016 and October 18, 2016. Released documents included opposition research performed by the DNC, including a memorandum analyzing potential criticisms of candidate Trump, internal policy documents such as recommendations on how to address politically sensitive issues, analysis of specific congressional races, and fundraising documents. Releases were organized around thematic issues such as specific states, e.g. Florida and Pennsylvania, that were perceived as competitive in the 2016 U.S. presidential election. Beginning in late June 2016, the GRU also used the Guccifer 2.0 persona to release documents directly to reporters and other interested individuals. Specifically, on June 27, 2016, Guccifer 2.0 sent an email to the news outlet The Smoking Gun, offering to provide, quote, exclusive access to some leaked emails linked to Hillary Clinton's staff, end quote. The GRU later sent the reporter a password and link to a locked portion of the DCLeaks.com website that contained an archive of emails stolen by Unit 26165 from a Clinton campaign volunteer in March of 2016. that the Guccifer 2.0 persona provided reporters access to a restricted portion of the DC Leaks website tends to indicate that both personas were operated by the same or a closely related group of people. The GRU continued its release efforts through Guccifer 2.0 into August of 2016. It's the Mueller report. You know, every day here on the Thom Hartmann Program, Louise and I and our team, Sean, Nate, Shira, Dave, Chase, Sue, Nigel, Ron, we all work to put together the very, very best show we possibly can. And there's an enormous amount of work that goes into the show. And one of the things that comes out of that is a lot of content, a lot of specific information that we go through and we dig out and, you know, we want to share with you. And Sue puts that into our newsletter every week. And I think you will, if you don't already receive our newsletter, it comes in email every day, about an hour after we're off the air, or maybe a couple hours after we're off the air. And Sue goes through and pulls literally every link to every story that we talked about and puts it into the newsletter. It's free. We don't sell the list or anything. You complete safety and security. There's no charge. There's no nothing. Just, you know, plug in your email address over at thomhartmann.com. And you get signed up for the newsletter. It's all fairly obvious. You'll see it on the website. So check it out, thomhartmann.com. Thank you.
Want to connect with the show online? You can find the Thom Hartmann Program on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
And welcome back. Thom Hartmann here with you. Congressman Ro Khanna is with us for the hour today, answering your calls. 202-808-9925 is the number. Congressman Khanna is the vice chair of the Congressional Progressive Caucus. His website, Khanna, KHANNA.house.gov. You can tweet him at Rep, as in representative, Rep Ro, R-O, Khanna. And Congressman, welcome back to the program.
It's great to be on, Tom.
So what's at the top of the hit parade in Congress this week?
Well, we just passed through the House the Equality Act, which would end discrimination for people who are gay or transgender. It's so obvious, yet the disappointing thing is you have basically the entire Republican Party voting against the measure, and it's really one of those votes that historically people will look back and say, how did those people vote against something that's so basic to human rights? We're also very concerned and engaged in preventing a war to Iran. We've had a number of briefings, a number of caucus meetings. And then finally, there's real concern about the chipping away or even overturning of Roe versus Wade, and a lot of conversation among members about that.
Yeah, I believe it was Elizabeth Warren yesterday said that there might be a federal legislative way around this. You know, you're the constitutional scholar here. I couldn't figure out how that would work. It seemed to me that unless Congress passed an absolute right to abortion, that the states would always have the ability to override that.
Yes, I mean, I think there's the Alabama law, which is clearly unconstitutional, and I don't think that's even going to get up to the Supreme Court. But then there are these other laws that are putting restrictions on abortion, requiring mandatory ultrasounds, requiring mandatory waiting periods, the fetal heartbeat laws. And I think Senator Warren thinks that we can preempt a lot of those state laws with a strong federal law so that the state laws wouldn't have effect if the federal government had strong laws. Right now, the recourse is to have these laws be held unconstitutional under Roe versus Wade, and that's risky with the current court. But if we have strong federal legislation that preempts state legislation, that could be one way of safeguarding the right.
Yeah, well, we'll see how it shakes out. Let's pick up some phone calls here. Peter in Chicago, you're on the air with Congressman Khanna.
Hello, Tom. Hello, Congressman.
Hi, Peter.
The left keeps talking about impeaching Trump, and you guys do nothing about it. And you say that you have the evidence to do it, and yet nothing's being done. So really, all it is just a hot box that you're going to continue on with the mantra. And there's a lot more important things in our country that we need attention to, Congressman. And as far as I can see, the House has done very little in the 100-plus days that you've been in control. So I'm wondering, other than the bills that aren't going to pass anything in the Senate, you got to come up with something that you guys can agree on and get things done for the people in the country rather than obsess on this whole Trump deal.
Well, it sounds like our first official call from the DNC, Congressman. Your thoughts? Or the RNC, excuse me.
Well, Peter, look, here's the record. We passed gun safety legislation, common sense gun safety legislation, not things like ban assault weapons, which I and many progressives agree with. We just said let's have a universal background check and close the loopholes. We can't get the Senate to pass that or the president to sign it. We've passed campaign finance reform. Let's get big money out of politics and stop gerrymandering districts. We can't get the Senate to pass that. We said let's get back into the Paris Accords to take on climate change. We can't get the Senate to pass that. Speaker Pelosi has said we're willing to pass a $2 trillion infrastructure bill. Even Donald Trump wants to pass that, supposedly. His own chief of staff the next day comes out and says, no, we don't have the money to do it. And McConnell says, no, I'm not going to move that. So I think it's very fair to judge the House on what we can pass and what we do pass. And I'm confident we're going to have a very strong agenda at the end of the 2 years. But we can't force the president to sign things or force McConnell to move things. And McConnell's view is just pure obstructionism.
Andy in Billings, Montana. You're on the air with Congressman Khanna.
Mm-hmm. Hey, Congressman and Tom. Thank you for taking my call. I wanted to mention one of the famous activists. Years ago, I had picked up her book, Gloria Steinem, and one of her famous lines was, if men could get pregnant, abortion would be a sacrament. And when I heard that and read that book, I watched the movie If These Walls Could Talk. It talks about gay rights. It talks about abortion rights. Totally changed my mind. I grew up very conservative. My question is, and I don't know if this would ever happen, but what's good for the goose should be good for the gander. And I think mandatory vasectomies for men, including myself, or anybody of age to be able to get a woman pregnant should be in action, because it's so hypocritical to mandate women's health and their choice and what they want to do. And if they choose to pay to have that reversed, it's on them. And I'll take the answer off air. Thank you so much.
Congressman, if I could toss something onto that. I'm wondering, now that we have DNA technology that didn't exist in biblical times, didn't even exist 30 years ago, and we can, with pretty much absolute certainty, determine who was the father of anything. What about a very simple law that said any woman charged with any crime in these United States having to do with abortion, miscarriage, et cetera, whatever penalty is applied to her should be applied to the man who was 50% participating in producing that pregnancy?
Yeah, well, Andy and Tom, let me say this. First of all, I think this is an issue completely of gender equality. I mean, the idea that we're imposing this on women and we don't have the same imposition on men. We wouldn't say that a man needs to strap up their body and sustain life in any way, is why I think that Roe versus Wade ultimately should have been grounded in the 14th Amendment. It's not just a matter of privacy. It's a matter of equality. And Ronald Dworkin and Catherine McKinnon and some of the legal scholars have said that this is really about a fundamental equality and gender equality. I mean, I don't think that we should be criminalizing this in the first place. So I find it hard to say we need to criminalize the men, because I don't think it should be criminal in the first place. We need to just recognize the constitutional right guaranteed under Roe versus Wade and put it on firmer foundation under the 14th Amendment.
Yeah, it sounds much more reasonable. Josh in Virginia Beach, Virginia. Hey, Josh, you're on the air with Congressman Khanna.
Hey, Tom and Congressman Khanna. I called recently to talk about the importance of local elections, and I had founded an organization that encourages progressives to run for local office called Local Bernicrats.
Terrific.
I look at abortion as a wedge issue that the establishment uses on significant portions of the electorate to keep corporatists in power. for lack of a better word. And I think that certainly would take electing a lot of progressives to fix this issue and a lot of other big national issues that are facing us as progressives. And I guess I have a tough question for you and also your bold progressive audience. And I asked this of Senator Sanders and AOC on Twitter, but they're probably very busy right now to answer, I suppose. But this is why your show is so powerful, because you actually take calls. Let's face it, we should always expect the establishment to attack us and use these sort of these tactics on us until we take over the local and state levels for a bottom-up support of the federal levels to get the progressives in those in Congress and in the presidency. And if going from the local and the state to federal, if that's the solution, then shouldn't we focus on encouraging progressive candidates as much as we focus on national topics?
Well, Josh, let me say two things. First, on your second point, that we need to be encouraging local candidates, I couldn't agree more. I mean, that was Newt Gingrich's strategy on the conservative side, or the Koch brothers' strategy, and they said we need to be running people in school boards and state legislators and a board of supervisors, and it's not just about focusing on Congress, and it's not just about focusing on the Senate or the presidency. And unfortunately, they built a very successful network of conservatives elected at very different levels. And we need to replicate that on the progressive side. Fortunately, I think it's happening. In California, you've had a lot of people who supported Senator Sanders get involved after 2016. They now won a plurality of the California State Democratic Party delegates. Many of them have won local office. I appreciate your effort. So I do think that that is absolutely critical in building a movement. And Senator Sanders often says that just getting him to the White House is good, but it's woefully inadequate. That to bring change, it's really going to require a mass movement in this country, not just the election of any individual. On your second point, I think the reason that Roe versus Wade is so important and abortion is so important is it goes to the fundamental issue of equality. And that's not, in my view, I don't think it's just a wedge issue. It goes to a fundamental human right where we believe that women should have a constitutional right to their bodies, and that if they don't have that basic sense of...
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
We'll be back with more of your calls for Congressman Ro Khanna in just a moment. He's the vice chair of the Congressional Progressive Caucus and represents the 17th District of the state of California. And welcome back. Sorry to step on you there, Congressman. The machine gives me no mercy.
I'm getting too long-winded. Huh?
No. You could hear the music, though, right? You were just misestimating the time.
Hear it.
Okay.
I just think that this is an issue. This is a fundamental issue of equality, equal opportunity, equality of at the workplace, equality in terms of a person's rights to their own body. And I do think it has to be a key part of the progressive agenda and the Democratic Party agenda.
Yeah, I totally agree. Colleen in Manorville, New York, watching on Free Speech TV. Colleen, you're on the air with Congressman Khanna.
Good afternoon, gentlemen. You both present me with so many dilemmas, how many questions in so little time. I wanted to point out to you something, if you can believe it, the darker side of the state. And it has to do with marriage laws. And the reality is that children as young as 11 can be married off to their rapists. And there's three problems with this, which is, one, they cannot go to a domestic violence shelter until they're 18. They cannot contract with a lawyer until they are 18. They cannot go to court and represent themselves until they are 18. And so and you would say, why would a parent, mother or father, want to go along with this? And this gets them out of a child endangerment fine or criminal indictment. But sometimes these girls are impregnated or raped by a man as old as his late 20s or early 30s. And these women are running around the country trying to tell people it's not just about abortion. It's about being, handed off to your rapist. And it's about being used to reward someone for a wrongdoing. And the last thing I have to say is to Congressman Khanna is a question, because I know he was on another show, and somebody at the end of his speaking when he was off the phone said, "Why doesn't that man run for president?" And so that is my question. Why aren't you running for president?
Well, ma'am, Colleen, I appreciate, first of all, your passion on your first point. And, of course, we have statutory rape laws that make it illegal. But, Tom, do you know on these laws about marriage, is there a federal law, or do states have different laws?
It varies from state to state. We did a show on this maybe a month or so ago, and it's pretty shocking how many states allow underage marriage if the parents simply sign a consent form. And
no, that's just unconscionable. I'm going to look in after this call. This is why I love this show, because I get more educated on every different issue. But I'm going to have my staff look into. I'm sure there's federal legislation to have a standard law. I think personally it should be at least 18, where you shouldn't be allowed to have parents sign someone away as it's almost a conception of women as property. That's medieval, and we need to outlaw that. I used to think child marriage was an issue in third world countries, and it's shocking that the extent that it may be happening in our own country.
Yeah, and you're not going to run for president?
I'm supporting Bernie Sanders, and this is my second term, so I'm very happy with Bernie Sanders, and I'm very happy with Elizabeth Warren. We've got some great progressives.
In other words, ask him again in 4 years. We'll be back. Congressman Ro Khanna with us. We'll be right back with more of your calls for him in just a moment. Every day here on the Thom Hartmann Program, Louise and I and our team, Sean, Nate, Shira, Dave, Chase, Sue, Nigel, Ron, we all work to put together the very, very best show we possibly can. And there's an enormous amount of work that goes into the show. And one of the things that comes out of that is a lot of content, a lot of specific information that we go through and we dig out and we want to share with you. And Sue puts that into our newsletter every week. And I think you will, if you don't already receive our newsletter, it comes in email every day, about an hour after we're off the air, or maybe a couple hours after we're off the air. And Sue goes through and pulls literally every link to every story that we talked about and puts it into the newsletter. It's free. We don't sell the list or anything. You complete safety and security. There's no charge. There's no nothing. Just plug in your email address over at thomhartmann.com. And you get signed up for the newsletter. It's all fairly obvious. You'll see it on the website. So check it out, thomhartmann.com. Thank you.
Want to connect with the show online? You can find the Thom Hartmann Program on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram.
Welcome back. Congressman Ro Khanna taking your calls for the hour here on the Thom Hartmann Program.
Right.
Kamaru in Dayton, Ohio. You're on the air with Congressman Khanna.
Good afternoon, gentlemen.
Hi.
Good afternoon.
My question is about the hypocrisy of the Democratic Party in general and the even the progressive wing of the Democratic Party in not calling out what is happening in Venezuela. And you can't make excuses about saying that the current president is horrible, because no one is worse than Donald Trump. So that should not justify our trying to interfere in the duly elected government of this country.
Kamaru, is the point that you're making that we're complaining about Russia interfering in our election while we're overtly and explicitly interfering in other countries' elections, like Venezuela?
Like Venezuela, absolutely.
Yeah. Okay, Congressman.
And why are they not saying anything about it?
Yeah.
Carl, I wrote an op-ed on this in the Washington Post. You can Google it 3 months ago, saying that we should stand up to the intervention in Venezuela and that the Democrats should condemn what Pence did. I mean, Pence basically called Guaido, who was at best Speaker of the House, and anointed him and said he's going to be the leader. Now, I believe Maduro has had human rights violations, and I believe he's had failed economic policies. But the irony of our intervention is we've ended up strengthening him, because Maduro goes around and says, look, the Americans are intervening, and he's been able to rally his support. And it's utter naivete to think that there would have been some violence-free transition to Guaido when Maduro has inherited so much of Chavez's base. What I recommended in the Washington Post op-ed is that we allow the Pope or Mexico or Uruguay to have a negotiated settlement and let the regional powers and the Pope take charge. Unfortunately, you're absolutely right. I'm not going to name all the Democrats who were praising Donald Trump and Mike Pence, but there were way too many Democrats who were standing in solidarity with the rhetoric coming out of the administration. We need to be a voice for restraint, and we need to have some humility in our interventions and their success.
May in Annandale, Virginia. You're on the air with Congressman Khanna.
Hi there. Thank you both for your services for us. I'm concerned about this thing with Iran. I don't know if the War Resolution Act will help protect us with that. And I'm really curious about this with the Saudis reaching for nuclear capability, that with that we know secondary comes nuclear arms. And since they were partly responsible for funding terrorists and fund terrorists around the world, for them to be able to possibly have this as an underlying catalyst, as an excuse for them to be able to call to have arms, where might that lead us? So that's kind of a two-part question there.
Well, ma'am, I appreciate the question, and I share your concern. Look, this has been a provocation that we have caused by labeling the Iranian Special Forces as a terrorist organization, by having a maximalist pressure campaign of economic sanctions that are leading Iran into acts of desperation, and by increasing the risk of provocation by sending an aircraft carrier there. So you're right to be concerned. Congress is going to do everything we can, from invoking the War Powers Act to trying to defund any escalation. But the challenge is that if there is a skirmish, the commander-in-chief has, under current law, the right of self-defense. And my fear is that you're going to have an escalation there that leads to conflict, and that Congress isn't going to be able to act soon enough. But the good news is that this time, the Democratic caucus is unified. Unlike in Venezuela, where people are split, I don't think there's a single Democrat in our caucus who wants to see a war in Iran. And you've had progressives, new Democrats, many Democrats speaking out strongly against that.
Thank God for that. Congressman Ro Khanna with us, taking your calls for the hour. We'll be back in just a moment with more of your calls for him.
You're listening to the Thom Hartmann Program. Call 202-808-9925.
Congressman Khanna represents the 17th District of California. He's the vice chair of the Congressional Progressive Caucus. Khanna.house.gov is the website. The Mueller report, this is page 41, dissemination of the hacked materials. They're talking about the GRU, which is the Russian Secret Service or its equivalent. The GRU began planning the releases at least as early as April 19th, 2016, when Unit 26165 registered the domain dcleaks.com through a service that anonymized the registrant. Unit 26165 paid for the registration using a pool of Bitcoin that it had mined. The dcleaks.com landing page pointed to different tranches of stolen documents arranged by victim or subject matter. Other dcleaks.com pages contained indexes of the stolen emails that were being released, bearing the sender, recipient, and date of the email. To control access and the timing of releases, pages are sometimes password protected for a period of time and later made unrestricted to the public. Starting in June 2016, the GRU posted stolen documents onto the website dcleaks.com, including documents stolen from a number of individuals associated with the Clinton campaign. These documents appeared to have originated from the personal email accounts, in particular Google and Microsoft accounts, rather than the DNC and DCCC computer networks. DCLeaks victims included an advisor to the Clinton campaign, a former DNC employee, and Clinton campaign employee, and 4 other campaign volunteers. The GRU released through DCLeaks.com thousands of documents, including personal identifying and financial information, internal correspondence related to the Clinton campaign and prior political jobs, and fundraising files and information. Page 42. GRU officers operated a Facebook page under the DC Leaks moniker, which they primarily used to promote releases of materials. The Facebook page was administered through a small number of pre-existing GRU-controlled Facebook accounts. GRU officers also used the DC Leaks Facebook account, the Twitter account @DCLeaks, and the email account dcleaksproject@gmail.com to communicate privately with reporters and other U.S. persons. GRU officers using the DC Leaks persona gave certain reporters early access to archives of leaked files by sending them links and passwords to pages on the DCLeaks.com website that had not yet become public. For example, on the July 14, 2016, GRU officers operating under the DC Leaks persona sent a link and password for a non-public DC Links webpage to a U.S. reporter via the Facebook account. Similarly, on September 14, 2016, GRU officers sent reporters Twitter direct messages from @DCLinks_ with a password to another non-public part of the DC Leaks website. The DC Leaks website, DCLeaks.com website, remained operational and public until March of 2017. Item number 2, Guccifer 2.0. On June 14, 2016, the DNC and its cyber response team announced the breach of the DNC network and suspected theft of DNC documents. In the statements, the cyber response team alleged that Russian state-sponsored actors, which they referred to as Fancy Bear, were responsible for the breach. Apparently, in response to that announcement, on June 15, 2016, GRU officers using the persona Guccifer 2.0 created a WordPress blog. In the hours leading up to the launch of that WordPress blog, GRU officers logged into a Moscow-based server used and managed by Unit 74455 and searched for a number of specific words and phrases in English, including, quote, some hundred sheets, quote, Illuminati, and, quote, worldwide known. Approximately 2 hours after the last of those searches, Guccifer 2.0 published its first post, attributing the DNC server hack to a lone Romanian hacker and using several of the unique English words and phrases that the GRU officers had searched for that day. Page 43. That same day, June 15, 2016, the GRU also used the Guccifer 2.0 WordPress blog to begin releasing to the public documents stolen from the DNC and DCCC computer networks. The Guccifer 2.0 persona ultimately released thousands of documents stolen from the DNC and DCCC in a series of blog posts between June 15, 2016 and October 18, 2016. Released documents included opposition research performed by the DNC, including a memorandum analyzing potential criticisms of candidate Trump, internal policy documents such as recommendations on how to address politically sensitive issues, analysis of specific congressional races, and fundraising documents. Releases were organized around thematic issues such as specific states, e.g. Florida and Pennsylvania, that were perceived as competitive in the 2016 U.S. presidential election. Beginning in late June 2016, the GRU also used the Guccifer 2.0 persona to release documents directly to reporters and other interested individuals. Specifically, on June 27, 2016, Guccifer 2.0 sent an email to the news outlet The Smoking Gun, offering to provide, quote, exclusive access to some leaked emails linked to Hillary Clinton's staff, end quote. The GRU later sent the reporter a password and link to a locked portion of the DCLeaks.com website that contained an archive of emails stolen by Unit 26165 from a Clinton campaign volunteer in March of 2016. That the Guccifer 2.0 persona provided reporters access to a restricted portion of the DC Leaks website tends to indicate that both personas were operated by the same or a closely related group of people. The GRU continued its release efforts through Guccifer 2.0 into August of 2016. It's the Mueller Report.
Want to connect with the show online? You can find the Thom Hartmann Program on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram.
I may may be coming to your city soon on our book tour for the hidden history of guns and the Second Amendment. I'll be in New York, Washington, D.C., Portland, Los Angeles, Seattle, San Francisco, Chicago, and Minneapolis. Here I come. More information is available at thomhartmann.com. Welcome back. Thom Hartmann here with you. Just FYI, the article that I shared with you in the first hour that I wrote yesterday is up on both Common Dreams and alternate.org, commondreams.org and alternate.org. It's titled The Republican Parties on the Road to Mass Lockups for Women Who Have Miscarriages. I think and hope you will find it fascinating. On the line with us, Congressman Ro Khanna, taking your calls for the hour. He's the vice chair of the Congressional Progressive Caucus and represents the 17th District of California in the U.S. House of Representatives. Rep Ro Khanna is his Twitter handle if you want to reach out to him. And Jeff in Portland, Oregon. You're Jefferson Smith?
No, Tom.
Oh, another Jeff. Okay, Jeff, you're on the air with Congressman Khanna.
All right. Well, thanks for taking my call. It's always a privilege to talk to you guys. With this so-called administration, we're certainly in Dr. Strange-Levian times, and we need Congress to assert itself. Congressman Khanna, to block any military action against Iran that doesn't have congressional approval. And to that end, Senator Sanders does have a petition for all of us to sign. Without a doubt, there's no bigger immediate concern than preventing another catastrophic war. But my question for you today, Congressman, is about the PRO, the Protect the Right to Organize Act, that was introduced last week in both the House and the Senate. I believe, along with the Green New Deal and Medicare for All, that it should be a pillar of the Democratic nominees' platform in 2020. Do you agree? And who do you see giving it the most support heretofore?
Jeff, I absolutely agree with you. I think one of the big misses of the Obama administration, and I was part of the Obama administration, I have tremendous respect for President Obama, was that we did not get the right to organize and the protection for that through Congress and signed by the president when we had all three branches of government, or at least the two chambers and the executive branch. And so we need to prioritize that. I strongly support it. Mark Pocan has led the effort here in the House. He's the chair of the Progressive Caucus and a frequent guest on the Hartmann Show. I would argue that Senator Sanders and Senator Warren are probably the two candidates who have the most commitment to it. Senator Sanders has even unionized his own campaign, so he has a tremendous commitment to the right to organizing. And if you look at the stagnation of wages, it's directly correlated with the decline of unions in this country.
Fred in Los Angeles, you're on the air with Congressman Khanna.
It was some static when he said my name.
Hey, Fred.
Yes. Since you're from California, I think that, first of all, you should consider running for Senate. Second of all, there's an issue, I'm not sure if it's specific to California, but this has to do with Medicare for All, these two questions. The first one is, I'm disabled, and in order to qualify for Medicaid, there's a clawback feature that says that any money that I earn has to go back to the state to pay for my medical bills. Would that carry over into Medicare for All? And second of all, how are you going to handle the abortion issue in Medicare for All? And I'll take my answer off line.
I appreciate that question. First of all, it would not carry over. I mean, right now, folks who are disabled, a lot of them, and I met in my district, many of them want to go back to work part-time or work a few hours, and we penalize them for doing that because we increase their costs on health care and other issues. Under Medicare for All, everyone will get basic health care, and there'll be a minimal fee that people pay based on their ability to pay and their income, but it will be nowhere near the $9,000 that the average family pays as a premium. It'll be less than $1,000, and it won't matter whether you're working the full time or not. Everyone gets full coverage, and that's going to include dental and vision. And so that's your example is exactly why we need Medicare for All. And Medicare for All, under both Senator Sanders' plan and Pramila Jayapal's plan, will cover reproductive rights. That's a fundamental right, and women should have access to it, and they ought to have that covered. And so the plans would cover that. In terms of the Senate, I actually love being a House member. I think the House is a more irreverent body. I once walked over with colleagues to the Senate, and you could hear pin drop silence. You know, the House, we laugh and joke and question authority, and it's much more rowdy. And so I'm perfectly happy. I'm a little bit more of a willing to question the leadership when I disagree with them, and I love serving in the House.
Marie in New York City, you're on the air with Congressman Khanna.
Yes, hello.
Hi, you're on the air.
Hi.
Hello there. Mr. Hartman, first of all, thank you very much for your reading the Mueller report. It's not that easy to get a paper copy of it.
Oh, you're welcome, Marie. Thank you.
This is my question. There are, especially after listening to the readings, is there no lawyers who are interested in suing Russia? The voters they absconded with the democracy. And I think that there would be people who would be willing to sign up to some kind of mass movement or class action suit or something to say that the voters, the voters are outraged by what has happened to our election and the possibility that this is going to be continuing.
Well, Mary, I appreciate your outrage. You know, this is why it's so disingenuous when Bill Barr says that the investigation should never have taken place and it was political. And then you have to look at the facts. I mean, Bob Mueller concluded that there was sweeping and systematic interference in our elections by the Russians. That's just a fact. He indicted 37 people. I mean, we're not going to get all of them to be prosecuted because the Russians aren't willing to give them up. And the reason that we haven't had action is because this president refuses to acknowledge the interference, has minimized it in his conversations with Putin. The reality is that a class action lawsuit won't go anywhere if our political leaders aren't willing to make this a issue of bilateral diplomacy and making it clear to the Russians that what they did was wrong. Because the Russians will just ignore any lawsuit and just say they don't have jurisdiction in Russian courts or over Russian individuals. So I think this is why Tom did such a service to the country by reading that. Any American reading that report will be horrified by the level and extent of the Russian interference.
Lowell in Salem, Oregon. You're on the air with Congressman Khanna.
Hi, Congressman Khanna. I want to address one of the incrementalist issues that I have with some of the policies that Democrats do. For example, there is a student loan forgiveness program for teachers who work in low-income areas. Lee Camp reported that only 1% of teachers get approved or have their loans forgiven. Now, is there anything that Democrats are going to do to fix that program and get it so that 100% get approved?
Well, I'm happy to look into that program, and I agree with you that we need to have student loan forgiveness for teachers. As it is, teachers are so underpaid. In my district, they can't even afford often to live there because the cost of living is so high, and teachers are at the front lines of our education system. So I'm all for increasing their pay and providing more housing. One way to help is to have prioritized loan forgiveness, and I'm happy to look into legislation to expand that program. I didn't realize only 1% are taking advantage of it.
Joe in Cupertino, California. We have just a minute to the break. Joe, you're on the air with Congressman Khanna.
Well, let me bring a little pain to the conversation just by saying that the king is not the law is the king. So I want to just talk about one thing specific, and that's the DCCC and what is Congresswoman Boot's attempt to try to preclude incumbent challenges. And I spoke with Congressman Pocan on the show recently about it, and I see the Progressive Caucus is demonstrating that they're not supporting that position. Congressman Khanna, I would suggest, if you will, we need to be a little bit more boisterous on this issue, because this is how we got you. It was your attempt to challenge the incumbent here in this district that made this change, and now people in this district are looking at you to run for president. AOC, the Democrats were going to win with bringing in the progressive youth of America, not the same old thing that we had 20 years ago. And I want to see if we can reinvigorate this push with Joe Biden coming into the race to make sure we talk about the issues. Health care for all.
Well, let's hear what he has to say. We only have 20 seconds left, Joe.
Well, Joe, I appreciate that. I completely agree with you. The DCCC position and Sherry Bustos' position, which is that if you're a consultant, you can't work for anyone against an incumbent, is an illegal restraint of trade. It suppresses competition. Mark Pocan, Pramila Jayapal, and I have been vocally opposed to this. And then just recently, we read that Sherry Bustos is going and doing a fundraiser for Dan Lipinski, the one anti-choice member of Congress in our caucus. I couldn't think of a worse timing to do that when you have all of these laws that are tearing apart at Roe versus Wade. So we need change, and this is high up on the priority list of the Progressive Caucus.
Congressman Ro Khanna taking your calls for the hour. We'll be back in just a moment with more of your calls for him. Stick around.
You're listening to Thom Hartmann. Visit thomhartmann.com for audio and video archives.
Congressman Khanna's Twitter handle is Rep, R-E-P, Ro, R-O, Khanna, K-H-A-N-N-A, and his website is khanna.house.gov. And welcome back. Let's see here. I'm sorry. Zach in North Hollywood, California. You're on the air with Congressman Khanna.
Good morning. Pleasure to speak with you. Just real quick before I get to my main point. Sanders, Warren, 2020. Barack Obama for Secretary of State. My main point, as I understand it, the three articles of impeachment for Richard Nixon were obstruction of justice, abuse of power, and contempt of Congress. Now, don't we already, my question is, don't we already have Trump on obstruction of justice and abuse of power, and hasn't Barr already committed contempt of Congress?
Certainly there has been systematic misconduct. I think the Speaker's view is that we need to hear from Bob Mueller, we need to hear from Bill Barr, and then we need the Judiciary Committee to do their work. I mean, remember, the Mueller investigation was 2 years, and Congress has had this information for 1.5 months. So the Speaker is open to going wherever the facts and the committees lead, but she understands that you have to bring public sentiment along with you. And in Watergate, the committees were able to do that, and I think the challenge is how are we going to do that now in a polarized time. My view is if you have Bob Mueller testify on TV, you have Don McGahn testify, you have the committees do this work, they can help inform the American people about the systematic misconduct that took place.
Mary in Las Vegas, you're on the air with Congressman Khanna.
Good morning, gentlemen. I'm hoping something can be done to sanction or have the State Bar go after William Barr. He's the one putting his jail. I don't believe anything that's going to come out of his review, and he is complicit in the cover-up in this administration. So
Marianne,
I hope some action can be taken against him quickly. Thank you.
Marianne, I completely agree with you. I mean, someone would be disbarred if they provided the kind of misleading summary of the Mueller report that Bill Barr did. Someone would be disbarred if they were as misleading in their testimony to the United States Congress as Bill Barr was. And Bill Barr, as you put it, has been covering up his entire career. I mean, he's the one who advised President George Herbert Walker Bush right after Christmas or right before Christmas in 1992 to pardon Caspar Weinberger and all those involved in the Iran-Contra hearings. So he is not a good actor. He has been covering up for Republican administration abuses his entire career. We will be holding him in contempt, and he ought to be referred, in my view, for perjury.
Mark in San Francisco, listening on 910 AM. You're on the air with Congressman Congressman Khanna.
Tom and Congressman, I'd like to see William Barr impeached, and I'd like to see it move quickly.
Well, I think we are moving. I mean, we're going to vote on contempt, and then it's up to the Judiciary Committee, but I've called for him to resign, and I agree with you that he's violated his oath of office and shouldn't be there.
It's coming up on 10 minutes before the hour. It's the Thom Hartmann Program. We're Congressman Ro Khanna taking your calls for the hour. His website, khanna.house.gov. You can tweet him at Rep. Ro Khanna. We'll be back with more of your calls for him in just a moment. You know, every day here on the Thom Hartmann Program, Louise and I and our team, Sean, Nate, Shira, Dave, Chase, Sue, Nigel, Ron, we all work to put together the very, very best show we possibly can. And there's an enormous amount of work that goes into the show. And one of the things that comes out of that is a lot of content, a lot of specific information that we go through and we dig out and, we want to share with you. And Sue puts that into our newsletter every week. And I think you will, if you don't already receive our newsletter, it comes in email every day, about an hour after we're off the air, or maybe a couple hours after we're off the air. And Sue goes through and pulls literally every link to every story that we talked about and puts it into the newsletter. It's free. We don't sell the list or anything. You complete safety and security. There's no charge. There's no nothing. Just, plug in your email address over at thomhartmann.com and you get signed up for the newsletter. It's all fairly obvious. You'll see it on the website. So check it out, thomhartmann.com. Thank you.
Want to connect with the show online? You can find the Thom Hartmann Program on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram.
Well, welcome back. Riley in Chicago, you're on the air with Congressman Khanna.
You say Riley?
Riley, that's you.
Hey, how are you? Thank you for taking my call. I'm a first-time caller.
Thank you.
Tom, thank you for everything that you do. I don't have Norman Goldman anymore, but you give me what I need.
Okay.
Just got two quick things, and that is Mr. America First's daughter is going and buying these voting machines over in China, from what I understood. And is there any legislation that is in place to make sure that these things aren't rigged already? And my second part is this. Congressman, can you influence the other people that whenever they have a sound bite, the last thing they say is, Mr. President, what do you have to hide, so that starts getting played in the media? And thank you. I'll be listening on the radio from here on.
Riley, I think it's a good suggestion in terms of what do you have to hide? What are you hiding? Why are you so afraid? One of the things the Democrats aren't as good at is simple sound bites that cut through. We're great at policy and the complexity of policy, but we do need to cut through with simple sound bites. So I'll certainly pass your suggestion on. The House Democrats did pass legislation. It was H.R. 1 that called for paper ballots and securing our elections, but Mitch McConnell refuses to move it. I don't understand how anyone looking at the type of interference wouldn't be concerned that our voting machines could be hacked. Anyone who reads the Mueller reports knows that they didn't just hack the DNC or Hillary Clinton campaign. They went after state secretary of states and county boards of elections. And we need something that has paper ballots and verification to make sure that doesn't ever happen to us in our democracy.
Dennis in Bergenfield, New Jersey. You're on the air with Congressman Khanna.
How's it going, Mr. Khanna and Tom? This is a question for both of you. I was wondering what your position on this. It's a difficult question. Do you feel that the Fed should be nationalized and owned by the government? And I'll just listen from here on in and just tell me your view on this and explain why.
Thank you, Dennis. Congressman?
Dennis, I appreciate it. I'll be curious of Tom's view. My view of the Fed is that it should be an independent agency, but it's too often prioritized fighting inflation instead of policies that are going to create jobs and wage growth. And anytime you have rises in wages, that's inflationary pressure. But we're so often fighting that with the Fed that we haven't allowed wages to rise. And the big challenge in our country has been basically wage stagnation for the past 30 years. So I would seek to appoint people to the Fed for the next president who understand that wage growth and job creation is the most important priority.
Yeah. David in Seattle, you're on the air with Congressman Khanna.
Hey, Congressman, how are you?
Hi, Davis. How are you?
Good, thank you. Hey, I wanted to ask you a question. I know you're not on this committee, but I wanted to ask a question about Deutsche Bank. And so in the committee hearings for, oh, God, sorry, I just got off a ladder. I really like the fact that the committee is fast-tracking some of these things with the impeachment deal and all of that. And my biggest thing is Deutsche Bank and Trump's emollients.
So David, what's your question? Sorry to move you along, but we're toward the end of the hour here.
Oh, no problem. So what I'd like to know is, do you have anything in the pipeline for investigating that and opening up the tax returns, or Deutsche Bank actually releasing information regarding Trump and his loans?
Davis, we do. The Oversight Committee has requested from Deutsche Bank and from other financial firms information about the president, and this is within our right. You know, every president of the United States gets audited. Their taxes get audited, and the reason is that we want to make sure that our elected leaders are living by the same rules as everyone else. And in this case, we are entitled to understand Trump's taxes and Trump's business holdings, and whether he is paying taxes that he's asking every other American citizen to pay. The good news is a federal judge is moving expeditiously on getting us those financial documents. Trump's lawyers have filed a lawsuit, not on his behalf as president, but on his behalf as a private citizen, which is absurd. Obviously, as President of the United States, or frankly, as a member of Congress, you don't retain the same expectation to privacy to your financial information as you do if you're an ordinary citizen. And just like I have to disclose my information, the President has to disclose his. I expect the court to rule in our favor.
Congressman, we just have 20 seconds here before the end of the hour. I'm curious what your thoughts are on what's coming up in the next week in Congress and where we should be focusing our attention and our activism.
Well, I think the most urgent threat, as some of your callers have brought up, is Iran and making sure that we don't get into an inadvertent war or an intentional war. And we need to just be vigilant and outspoken and make sure this time the Democratic Party is unified, unlike the time we were split when we marched into Iraq because half the Democrats were cheerleading us on. And second, we need to have a very robust strategy for taking on the assault on Roe versus Wade and make sure that we understand really that this is a threat to a basic constitutional right. Many people my age and even younger have grown up assuming that Roe versus Wade isn't going to be threatened. Thank you, Tom.
You're listening to Thom Hartmann.
We say fight back!
The Mueller report, this is page 41, dissemination of the hacked materials. They're talking about the GRU, which is the Russian Secret Service, or its equivalent. The GRU began planning the releases at least as early as April 19, 2016, when Unit 26165 registered the domain dcleaks.com through a service that anonymized the registrant. Unit 26165 paid for the registration using a pool of Bitcoin that it had mined. The dcleaks.com landing page pointed to different tranches of stolen documents arranged by victim or subject matter. Other dcleaks.com pages contained indexes of the stolen emails that were being released, bearing the sender, recipient, and date of the email. To control access and the timing of releases, pages were sometimes password protected for a period of time and later made unrestricted to the public. Starting in June 2016, the GRU posted stolen documents onto the website dcleaks.com, including documents stolen from a number of individuals associated with the Clinton campaign. These documents appeared to have originated from the personal email accounts, in particular Google and Microsoft accounts, rather than the DNC and DCCC computer networks. DCLeaks victims included an advisor to the Clinton campaign, a former DNC employee and Clinton campaign employee, and 4 other campaign volunteers. The GRU released through dcleaks.com thousands of documents, including personal identifying and financial information, internal correspondence related to the Clinton campaign and prior political jobs, and fundraising files and information. Page 42. GRU officers operated a Facebook page under the DCLeaks moniker, which they primarily used to promote releases of materials. The Facebook page was administered through a small number of pre-existing GRU-controlled Facebook accounts. GRU officers also used the DCLeaks Facebook account, the Twitter account @DCLeaks, and the email account dcleaksproject@gmail.com to communicate privately with reporters and other U.S. persons. GRU officers using the DCLeaks persona gave certain reporters early access to archives of leaked files by sending them links and passwords to pages on the dcleaks.com website that had not yet become public. For example, on the July 14, 2016, GRU officers operating under the DCLeaks persona sent a link and password for a non-public DCLeaks webpage to a U.S. reporter via the Facebook account. Similarly, on September 14, 2016, GRU officers sent reporters Twitter direct messages from @DCLinks_ with a password to another non-public part of the DCLeaks website. The DCLeaks website, dcleaks.com website, remained operational and public until March of 2017. Item number 2, Guccifer 2.0. On June 14, 2016, the DNC and its cyber response team announced the breach of the DNC network and suspected theft of DNC documents. In the statements, the cyber response team alleged that Russian state-sponsored actors, which they referred to as Fancy Bear, were responsible for the breach. Apparently, in response to that announcement, on June 15, 2016, GRU officers using the persona Guccifer 2.0 created a WordPress blog. In the hours leading up to the launch of that WordPress blog, GRU officers logged into a Moscow-based server used and managed by Unit 74455 and searched for a number of specific words and phrases in English, including, quote, some hundred sheets, quote, Illuminati, and, quote, worldwide known. Approximately 2 hours after the last of those searches, Guccifer 2.0 published its first post, attributing the DNC server hack to a lone Romanian hacker and using several of the unique English words and phrases that the GRU officers had searched for that day. Page 43. That same day, June 15, 2016, the GRU also used the Guccifer 2.0 WordPress blog to begin releasing to the public documents stolen from the DNC and DCCC computer networks. The Guccifer 2.0 persona ultimately released thousands of documents stolen from the DNC and DCCC in a series of blog posts between June 15, 2016 and October 18, 2016. Released documents included opposition research performed by the DNC, including a memorandum analyzing potential criticisms of candidate Trump, internal policy documents such as recommendations on how to address politically sensitive issues, analysis of specific congressional races, and fundraising documents. Releases were organized around thematic issues such as specific states, e.g. Florida and Pennsylvania, that were perceived as competitive in the 2016 U.S. presidential election. Beginning in late June 2016, the GRU also used the Guccifer 2.0 persona to release documents directly to reporters and other interested individuals. Specifically, on June 27, 2016, Guccifer 2.0 sent an email to the news outlet The Smoking Gun, offering to provide, quote, exclusive access to some leaked emails linked to Hillary Clinton's staff, end quote. The GRU later sent the reporter a password and link to a locked portion of the DCLeaks.com website that contained an archive of emails stolen by Unit 26165 from a Clinton campaign volunteer in March of 2016. That the Guccifer 2.0 persona provided reporters access to a restricted portion of the DC Leaks website tends to indicate that both personas were operated by the same or a closely related group of people. The GRU continued its release efforts through Guccifer 2.0 into August of 2016. It's the Mueller report. You know, every day here on the Thom Hartmann Program, Louise and I and our team, Sean, Nate, Shira, Dave, Chase, Sue, Nigel, Ron, we all work to put together the very, very best show we possibly can. And there's an enormous amount of work that goes into the show. And one of the things that comes out of that is a lot of content, a lot of specific information that we go through and we dig out and, you know, we want to share with you. And Sue puts that into our newsletter every week. And I think you will, if you don't already receive our newsletter, it comes in email every day, about an hour after we're off the air, or maybe a couple hours after we're off the air. And Sue goes through and pulls literally every link to every story that we talked about and puts it into the newsletter. It's free. We don't sell the list or anything. You complete safety and security. There's no charge. There's no nothing. Just, you know, plug in your email address over at thomhartmann.com. And you get signed up for the newsletter. It's all fairly obvious. You'll see it on the website. So check it out, thomhartmann.com. Thank you.
Want to connect with the show online? You can find the Thom Hartmann Program on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
And welcome back. Thom Hartmann here with you. It's Anything Goes Friday, by the way. I'll be picking up your phone calls here in just a moment. The article, my contribution to this Alabama, Georgia, et cetera, now Missouri abortion debate is up live over at the top of Common Dreams and alternate.org. One of the, I think, this is a remarkable post because I remember, I mean, I'm not a physician, I'm not a medical authority. I took, health class in high school, biology, but in terms of reproductive biology, it was basically not much. And I remember some months ago, I think, or maybe even longer ago than that, hearing the first time there was a reference to this heartbeat bill at 6 weeks, that at 6 weeks you could hear the heartbeat of a fetus, and I thought, wait a minute, it's not a fetus at that point, it's an embryo, and the embryo at 6 weeks, to the best of my knowledge, doesn't have a heart. It has, I mean, Mo Pinko posted this over on Democratic Underground. You can, under the title, Can We Get the Science Straight Here? And I think this is just so spot on. This is from the Mayo Clinic's Health and Lifestyle Pregnancy Week by Week in-depth prenatal chart. And where are you at 6 weeks? Well, here's what it says. At 6 weeks, the embryo is now made out of 3 layers. The top layer, the ectoderm, will give rise to your baby's outermost layer of skin, central and peripheral nervous system, eyes, and inner ears. Your baby's heart and a primitive circulatory system will form in the middle layer of cells, the mesoderm. This layer of cells will also serve as the foundation for your baby's bones, ligaments, kidneys, and much of the reproductive system. Will form. In other words, it's not a heartbeat. I mean, there's some electrical activity that's going on there that is detectable, but this is not a heart, it's not a heartbeat. And this whole thing of, and they feel pain. Well, I'm sorry, to feel pain, you have to have a brain. And the age at which they're saying, if you poke a bacteria with a pin, the bacteria will move away from you. It doesn't mean that the bacteria is feeling pain. It's a stimulus response. The forced pregnancy people are using language like heartbeat and pain in ways that are completely lies, B, non-scientific lies, and C, purely to pull on people's heartstrings and to deceive people. This is what they have to do to promulgate their oppression of women. So anyhow, I realize that, there was a lot of discussion of abortion over the last couple of days, and there's a lot of other things going on. At the same time, this is the issue that the Republicans are just like giddy about. They're just rolling. They're on a roll right now. And I think it's going to devastate the party. I may be very wrong. We'll see. But anyhow, so to your calls. It's Anything Goes Friday. John in Minneapolis. Hey, John, what's on your mind?
Yes, I just wanted to say in the abortion issue that I think it really reveals what we think of women as a society, just in the same way that Donald Trump has brought up what we think about other minority groups and bigotry and whatnot. And so I think that neoliberalism really feeds into that because our political system is so controlled by money, and I don't think they really care much whether women have the right to abortion or whether there is prejudice in the society. And we are so hyper-competitive, but yet we're also hypocritical about that because we want to denigrate women to keep them down. We want to keep minority groups down so that we really don't have to compete with them. And then we want to cheat our way, I mean, a lot of people do, apparently, into Harvard and Yale and whatnot. I think an egalitarian society, and you can see that women enjoy a much higher position, like in Iceland, in Sweden, in Finland. Often their legislators, they're broken right down the center, right. Or actually sometimes more women. So, that's what I think. I mean, it's my opinion, but I suspect there is something really very under the current, going on. And I think Eve Ensler had hit the nail on the head with her new book. And it's, there's some social psychology, cultural kind of thing that goes along with patriarchy, goes along with things that we just accept in a society that is so unequal. And that's all I have to say.
Yeah, well, you said it all very well, John, and I can't dispute any of it. Spot on. James in Spokane, Washington. Hey, James, what's up?
Oh, hey, Tom, I'll change the topic. The topic was for the congressman. I just wanted to know if there was a House caucus, in particularly for reform and anti-drug war. Because if there's not, there should be. Don't you agree?
A House caucus to oppose the drug war?
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah,
absolutely.
I don't know the answer to that question, James. I'm sorry, but I agree with you that there should be. And I'm guessing that there probably is, but I just don't know. But if I find out, I'll let you know. Okay.
A topic I'd like to speak of with you. I get your point about us Democrats not wanting a circular firing squad to assassinate all our candidates. You can't be saying that all these people are acceptable or should be acceptable to the Democratic Party, or in some cases to humanity.
Or in some cases, what?
To humanity.
Who specifically are you talking about?
Well, I mentioned it the other day. Let me preamble this by explaining to you that I lost a brother in Vietnam. Right. Okay? He's a hero. No doubt in my mind. He was a very good guy. When I see Joe Biden pinning Liberty medals on George Bush and Laura Bush, that's just too far. That makes a guy totally unacceptable to me. His credibility is shot completely. Yeah. And that's not even considering his history, the things he's done in the past.
Yeah, I get it, James, and
a point about
no, hang on just a second. Let me give you just a brief little riff here, and I'll keep you on the line, and you can respond to me.
Thank you.
I would encourage you to go read, because I just did last week, and for another book that I'm writing, a book on voting actually. Read Lincoln's first inaugural address, the speech that he gave the day that he was inaugurated in, I believe, March of 1861. And in that speech, he goes out of his way to say, I was not elected president to end slavery. I do not intend to end slavery. The southern states have every right to slavery. I'm not here to encourage the mixing of races. It's God's plan that the races should be separate. I mean, this was Abraham Lincoln's speech, his first speech to Congress as President of the United States. It's right there. And yet, look at what he did. Franklin Roosevelt, when he ran for president in 1932, he ran on a platform of balancing the budget and reducing tariffs, neither of which he ever ended up doing. Instead, Lincoln, when he came into office, he looked around and he said, oh, my God, the first week he was in office, most of the states in the South had seceded. FDR came into office, and literally the week he came into office, which was 4 months after the election, which is why they changed when the inauguration happened from March all the way back to January, right after his first term. When he came into office, literally every bank in the United States closed. And what they did is they responded to that moment. I am not a fan of the great man theory of history. I do not believe, by and large, there are some exceptions to this, and they tend to be the evil exceptions, but I don't believe, generally speaking, that it is the one great person that we have to wait for who's going to save us from everything. I think that we need to be focusing on. I strongly believe that is just wrong thinking. It's something that we got from Christianity, this idea Jesus is going to save us. We've superimposed that mentality on our politics, and if we can just find the perfect politician, that person is going to save us too. There is no perfect politician. And what happens typically is when a parade gets large enough, a person who has reasonable political instincts will jump to the front of that parade and will hoist a flag and will say, this is my parade. That's what Joe Biden did with gay marriage, if you'll recall, something that he had worked against. That's what Joe Biden did with busing, you'll recall, something he actually worked against back in the 1970s. And I could give you a few other examples. I don't mean this as a vigorous defense of Joe Biden. He is certainly not my first choice for Democratic president. My point is that if Joe Biden ends up being our party's nominee and you want to see progressive action in the White House, Joe Biden knows where the bodies are buried. He knows how to get things done legislatively, good and bad. The bankruptcy bill of 2005, terrible, a great example of terrible, right? But nonetheless, he knows how to get things done. And just like Franklin Roosevelt knew how to get things done, he came out of the most corrupt political system in the United States. He was the governor of New York State and a machine politician. He was being investigated for bribing a federal judge when he became president. And yet he rose to the occasion. But the only reason that Lincoln rose to the occasion and the only reason that Roosevelt rose to the occasion is because the American people demanded it of them. And I think that that's more important than our having internecine war among ourselves and between each other about who is going to be that person leading. We need to be such a pressure that regardless of who is the Democratic nominee, and for that matter, who becomes the next president, that person is going to take notice and move in a positive and progressive direction. Your turn, James.
I just want to say that we have at least two proven strong progressive candidates. Why are we considering these losers? Number one. Number two, this guy Pete Buttigieg, I have to tell you this, Tom, I got to qualify it first. I did not hear it directly. This is by way of Max Blumenthal. Is it Max Blumenthal? Yes, on the Lee Camp program. This is from Pete Buttigieg. He said he would be the first gay president to put Chelsea Manning in a gulag. I'm sorry, that's not a Democrat.
Yeah.
That's not a Democrat.
Well, see, those are the things, this is the stuff we're going to sort out, James. That's why you have a primary. That's why you have debates. That's why, and when the debates happen, we'll have discussions about those issues.
And it's valuable. We can't wait to weed these assholes out. I'm sorry.
I'm sorry, James. You can't talk like that on the air. You just can't do it. And I'm Xing you out. It's your last call. And you guys bumped that out, that obscenity. You got it out of there. Thank you very much. Okay, it's 18 minutes past the hour. We'll continue with Anything Goes Friday here on the Thom Hartmann Program. Stick around. We'll be back with more of your calls on the issues of the day, as it were. Phew, what a day. And yeah, I get it. Passions are high. And sometimes words pop out that shouldn't. And I appreciate your passion. The last caller, I forgot the name now. But, we got to get a hold of this.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
We'll be back with more of your calls in just a moment. It's 18 minutes past the hour. And welcome back. Fred in Bremerton, Washington. Hey, Fred, what's up?
Hi, Tom. Thanks for taking my call.
Sure.
I have to express my concerns about what's going on down in Alabama. I know inch by inch you can succeed at these things if they keep pushing and pushing on Roe v. Wade. I am a man who has experienced personally the ins and outs of what women have to do in order to survive in this country. And I don't believe to a person that there are too many men out there, I'm hoping, that are really misogynist enough to take those rights away from a woman who has it's an inalienable right to give birth. It's something that I'm sure Mr. Trump has experienced.
Yeah,
and
I think
every man within my voice knows that they came from a womb. And to have that it's call a God-given right taken away from the woman who has to experience it. No man experiences. I had 2 births, and I never experienced my wife being cut open because she had to have a C-section. I didn't have that happen to me. It happened to her.
Right. Because
she was giving birth. And to have the excuse me, I call them crackers in the South think that God's going to be blessing this country if we get rid of Roe v. Wade. It's better to wish on witches and make sure that Saturn's out of Capricorn. I'd be more apt to believe in that than I would these crackers down there thinking that God's going to come back to this planet and come back to America and bless it.
Yeah.
Because we don't have Roe v. Wade. I think that's barbaric and it's Dark Ages stuff.
Here's what I think
That's
is playing out right now, Fred, and to speak directly to what you said, and thank you for your passion, and I get it, and I share it. If you look at the situation with guns, my book about guns is just coming out right now, so this is very, very fresh in my head. We're getting ready to go on book tour here. I just finished writing that book about 6-8 months ago, and a year or 2 ago, even. The NRA was one of the most powerful lobbies in the United States. It was extraordinarily powerful. They were kingmakers. That is not the case anymore. The NRA is falling apart. And it's because Americans have seen the kind of damage that the NRA's policies of basically unrestricted ownership of guns have led to. They've led to mass shootings. They've led to our own children being killed, to mass shootings all over the place, not just kids. And so the tide of public opinion, once the NRA got what they wanted, the tide of public opinion has turned against them. During the time when they weren't getting what they wanted, it was easy for people to say, oh, yeah, Second Amendment, we should all have gun rights. Well, I think the same thing is happening with abortion. I think that the Republican Party, particularly if Brett Kavanaugh and well, the whole bunch of them, but, now you've got Kavanaugh, Gorsuch, and John Roberts are the ones that are in doubt. Or in question, what are they going to do? If they repeal Roe v. Wade, I think the GOP is going to be like the dog that caught the car, and they're going to be like, what the hell do we do now? And I think it's going to destroy the Republican Party because all of a sudden it's going to sink into Americans that this isn't just rhetorical and this is real and this will affect our lives and our daughters and our wives and so on. So I think that what's playing out here right now is actually a very healthy process, not the legislation, but the backlash to the legislation. And the ferocity of that backlash is very encouraging, Fred. I see the forced pregnancy group going down just like the forced guns. Every day here on the Thom Hartmann Program, Louise and I and our team, Sean, Nate, Shira, Dave, Chase, Sue, Nigel, Ron, we all work to put together the very, very best show we possibly can. And there's an enormous amount of work that goes into the show. And one of the things that comes out of that is a lot of content, a lot of specific information that we go through and we dig out and we want to share with you. And Sue puts that into our newsletter every week. And I think you will, if you don't already receive our newsletter, it comes in email every day, about an hour after we're off the air, or maybe a couple hours after we're off the air. And Sue goes through and pulls literally every link to every story that we talked about and puts it into the newsletter. It's free. We don't sell a list or anything. Complete safety and security. There's no charge. There's no nothing. Just, plug in your email address over at thomhartmann.com. And you get signed up for the newsletter. It's all fairly obvious. You'll see it on the website. So check it out, thomhartmann.com. Thank you.
Want to connect with the show online? You can find the Thom Hartmann Program on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram.
Welcome back. Norma in Montgomery, Alabama. Hey, Norma, what's on your mind today?
I'm sitting down here in Alabama. You can understand that I am disgusted and angry.
I can imagine.
And a friend of mine is now calling this Talabama, like the Taliban.
Ah, yeah.
Yeah. Well, nobody has any control over the Republican Party here. They think that our governor did this because she's bright and intelligent, and there are rumors to the exact opposite. And there are rumors that the Secretary of State, the Senate Pro Tem, the Attorney General are actually running the state.
A quick question, Norma, if I may. I understand that your governor, when she signed this anti-abortion law, said that she was doing it out of respect for life, and yet this week she is overseeing her 7th execution in Alabama. Do I have that right?
You're correct. And also, we're going to be building 3 new prisons. They're passing bonds to raise tens of billions of dollars to build new prisons. Right. And I'm wondering in the back of my mind if they're going to be tying this into their abortion bill so they'll have a place to arrest women and throw them in jail. These prisons are going to be run by a corporation, and they're going to be, it's going to be.
Then why is Alabama paying, raising money to pay for them?
Well, that's part of the.
It's just like George Bush and the Dallas Cowboys. The community pays and the corporation profits.
That's correct.
Yeah.
And there are 25 white men who voted for this thing, yep. Republican men, and overruled the few Democrats we have. And I keep screaming at people that we need to get, something going with our Democratic Party. We're supposed to have an election. It hasn't happened yet to elect a new Democratic board. And the DNC is backing off on making us do that. But if we cannot get women elected, women who will fight for women's rights, I look at the state as being doomed. And there's just so many things going on here that there's no time to talk about them. But to refuse to allow an exemption for young girls, I mentioned this last week, the pelvic girdle in a young girl has not matured enough to support a pregnancy.
Right.
And there's no way she can give birth. And the rest of her life, if she ever has another child, she'll have to have another cesarean. And without any health care here, there isn't any way to pay for the cesarean. So how many young girls are going to die because there's no health care? Are they going to throw them out the way they did the guy that came to the States with Ebola, send him home?
Yeah.
Yeah,
it's a terrible situation, Norma. It really is. And you wonder how much, the terrible average lifespan statistics from a century ago were the result of young women getting impregnated and dying in childbirth. Norma, thank you for the call. We'll be right back.
You're listening to the Thom Hartmann Program. Call 202-808-9925.
It's Anything Goes Friday. I'm back taking your calls. Stick around. We'll be right back. The Mueller report, this is page 41, dissemination of the hacked materials. They're talking about the GRU, which is the Russian Secret Service or its equivalent. The GRU began planning the releases at least as early as April 19th, 2016, when Unit 26165 registered the domain dcleaks.com through a service that anonymized the registrant. Unit 26165 paid for the registration using a pool of Bitcoin that it had mined. The dcleaks.com landing page pointed to different tranches of stolen documents arranged by victim or subject matter. Other dcleaks.com pages contained indexes of the stolen emails that were being released, bearing the sender, recipient, and date of the email. To control access and the timing of releases, pages are sometimes password protected for a period of time and later made unrestricted to the public. Starting in June 2016, the GRU posted stolen documents onto the website dcleaks.com, including documents stolen from a number of individuals associated with the Clinton campaign. These documents appeared to have originated from the personal email accounts, in particular Google and Microsoft accounts, rather than the DNC and DCCC computer networks. DC Leaks victims included an advisor to the Clinton campaign, a former DNC employee and Clinton campaign employee, and 4 other campaign volunteers. The GRU released through DCLeaks.com thousands of documents, including personal identifying and financial information, internal correspondence related to the Clinton campaign and prior political jobs, and fundraising files and information. Page 42. GRU officers operated a Facebook page under the DC Leaks moniker, which they primarily used to promote releases of materials. The Facebook page was administered through a small number of pre-existing GRU-controlled Facebook accounts. GRU officers also used the DC Leaks Facebook account, the Twitter account @DCLeaks, and the email account dcleaksproject@gmail.com to communicate privately with reporters and other U.S. persons. GRU officers using the DC Leaks persona gave certain reporters early access to archives of leaked files by sending them links and passwords to pages on the DCLeaks.com website that had not yet become public. For example, on the July 14, 2016, GRU officers operating under the DC Leaks persona sent a link and password for a non-public DC Links webpage to a U.S. reporter via the Facebook account. Similarly, on September 14, 2016, GRU officers sent reporters Twitter direct messages from @DCLinks_ with a password to another non-public part of the DC Leaks website. The DC Leaks website, DCLeaks.com website, remained operational and public until March of 2017. Item number 2, Guccifer 2.0. On June 14, 2016, the DNC and its cyber response team announced the breach of the DNC network and suspected theft of DNC documents. In the statements, the cyber response team alleged that Russian state-sponsored actors, which they referred to as Fancy Bear, were responsible for the breach. Apparently, in response to that announcement, on June 15, 2016, GRU officers using the persona Guccifer 2.0 created a WordPress blog. In the hours leading up to the launch of that WordPress blog, GRU officers logged into a Moscow-based server used and managed by Unit 74455 and searched for a number of specific words and phrases in English, including, quote, some hundred sheets, quote, Illuminati, and, quote, worldwide known. Approximately 2 hours after the last of those searches, Guccifer 2.0 published its first post, attributing the DNC server hack to a lone Romanian hacker and using several of the unique English words and phrases that the GRU officers had searched for that day. Page 43. That same day, June 15, 2016, the GRU also used the Guccifer 2.0 WordPress blog to begin releasing to the public documents stolen from the DNC and DCCC computer networks. The Guccifer 2.0 persona ultimately released thousands of documents stolen from the DNC and DCCC in a series of blog posts between June 15, 2016 and October 18, 2016. Released documents included opposition research performed by the DNC, including a memorandum analyzing potential criticisms of candidate Trump, internal policy documents such as recommendations on how to address politically sensitive issues, analysis of specific congressional races, and fundraising documents. Releases were organized around thematic issues such as specific states, e.g. Florida and Pennsylvania, that were perceived as competitive in the 2016 U.S. presidential election. Beginning in late June 2016, the GRU also used the Guccifer 2.0 persona to release documents directly to reporters and other interested individuals. Specifically, on June 27, 2016, Guccifer 2.0 sent an email to the news outlet The Smoking Gun, offering to provide, quote, exclusive access to some leaked emails linked to Hillary Clinton's staff, end quote. The GRU later sent the reporter a password and link to a locked portion of the DCLeaks.com website that contained an archive of emails stolen by Unit 26165 from a Clinton campaign volunteer in March of 2016. That the Guccifer 2.0 persona provided reporters access to a restricted portion of the DC Leaks website tends to indicate that both personas were operated by the same or a closely related group of people. The GRU continued its release efforts through Guccifer 2.0 into August of 2016. It's the Mueller Report.
Want to connect with the show online? You can find the Thom Hartmann Program on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram.
I may be coming to your city soon on our book tour for The Hidden History of Guns and the Second Amendment. I'll be in New York, Washington, D.C., Portland, Los Angeles, Seattle, San Francisco, Chicago, and Minneapolis. Here I come. More information is available at thomhartmann.com. It's Anything Goes Friday. Welcome back. Thom Hartmann here with you, and Bill in St. Helens, Oregon. Hey, Bill, what's up?
Tom, you know, the single most powerful tool the American people have was decided by the Supreme Court in Sparf versus United States in 1895, and that is...
You're talking jury nullification.
Yes, I am. And even though lawyers don't like it and judges don't like it, and it's certainly the possibility exists for abuse, we can both agree on that. The reality is what they said in Sparf was, we don't like it, we don't think they should do it, but here's the bottom line. But a jury can nullify a law they believe is unjust and is inviolate. An acquittal is an acquittal. A conviction can be overturned on appeal by a jury, can be overturned on appeal, but an acquittal is done. It's you know, it's double jeopardy, all of it. It's done. And the problem is, I was just looking and reading Sparf while I was listening to your show program, and some of the synopsises they're starting to rewrite the history of this. They're starting to say it doesn't really say that. You really can't. The courts don't like this, and
well, the courts not only don't like it, Bill, but it pretty much doesn't exist anymore. I mean, if you're in the jury pool and you raise any question at all about jury nullification, you're going to get bounced out. And I don't mean that as a good way to get out of jury duty, because if they think that's why you're saying it, then you might be held in contempt of court as well.
Yeah. No, Tom, what they started to do is they give you a couple of oaths to take. You take the first oath at your Boy Scout oath when you're sworn in as a juror, and then you take a second oath from the judge, basically saying you will go in and deliberate and find the person guilty or innocent based on the facts and the law as explained to the judge and no other consideration. Now, every time I'm called for jury duty, after the orientation, I walk up to the judge and I say, I'm not taking your second oath. I just want to be clear. I will not be taking your oath. That's jury tampering. You have no authority to be giving that oath. I will not respect the oath. I won't take it. Literally within a day, I always get a letter saying, we understand you don't want to serve and you're excused from jury duty. Now I've taken to line. Now I say, you know what, an oath that is null and void at inception is no oath at all. I can take that oath and totally ignore it because they have no right.
No, I get all that, Bill, and I think that on the facts and on the law, you are right. But you know, in terms of the practical application of it, it ain't happening anywhere in the United States. Do you know of a single case in the last couple of decades where a jury has decided that the law under which a person is being prosecuted is a law that they're not going to acknowledge?
I could find you one. I have read a couple of such cases, and at least one of them, the judge says, I'm going to hold the whole jury in contempt. And all the other judges said, walk away, walk away. You don't want to make this a whole high-profile issue. Because the goal here is to deny the right by obfuscation and basically suppression. And because when they decided in Sparf that the jury has a right to nullification, at the same time they said, but nobody has to inform the jury of this right. And what's happened is the courts have now made it an act of contempt of court to try to inform the jury.
For people who don't have any idea what Bill and I are talking about, the doctrine, as it were, is that and by the way, the philosophical underpinning of this is not that different from Sheriff Mack coming on and saying sheriffs, because they're elected law enforcement officers at a relatively local level, county level, are actually the supreme law enforcement officers of the nation. You know, because the Republic, small r Republican idea, the idea of Republican government, particularly prior to the Civil War, when we had strong states and a weak federal government, was that power always flows from the bottom up, not the top down, and that a jury is every bit as capable of determining whether, in their opinion, a law is legitimate as they are in determining the guilt or innocence of a person who's been charged with that law. You know, and we've been through this. You know, I've had this conversation with people over the years, Bill, a number of times, and you know, I just don't. I don't think I don't think that, you know, it works anymore.
Yes, it does work. It does work. You can still do it, but because no one knows they have it. But I'm going to synopsize it real simply. I wrote a letter to Judge Benson when he tried to take away this power just a couple of years ago. I wrote him a letter saying basically where to stick it. And I said, here's the problem, Judge. I said, you dispense the law, and I trust you to dispense the law, and I trust you to follow the law, but you have no option, Judge. You have to enforce the law. Juries dispense justice. Big difference.
No, I get it.
That's why juries... Yep.
I know the argument. I absolutely know the argument. And but you know, let's just make sure anybody who's listening who thinks that just bringing up the topic of jury nullification without, you know, really knowing what they're talking about is like a slick way to get out of jury duty. It's a great way to get yourself thrown in jail for contempt of court, you know, or you know, to end up on somebody's harassment cycle where you're constantly being called back. Because they do not take that lightly at all. I mean, they just do not. Bill, I got to move along, but thanks for the call. It's a fascinating topic, but, you know. Anyhow, Ron in Seattle. Hey, Ron, what's up?
Hey, Tom, I really enjoyed hearing the lady from Montgomery talk about the need to elect women.
Yes, Norma.
And my advice to the Democrats would be put Elizabeth Warren at the top of the ticket and as a running mate, Kamala Harris. And don't you think the whole dynamic coming out of the executive branch would change?
I do. And one of the things that I think is, this is my own personal conspiracy theory, but when I look back at, you know, Richard Nixon did not want to run against Ed Muskie. He knew that he would lose to Ed Muskie. All the polling told him that, and this was mostly internal polling. But he was pretty sure he could beat George McGovern. So, you know, he had Chuck Colson go up to Maine and screw up Ed Muskie to the point that Muskie basically, you know, got bounced out of the Democratic primary. And if I'm of the opinion that if Donald Trump knows that somebody in the Democratic field represents an existential threat to him, actually has a high probability of becoming elected president, easily becoming elected president, and bringing a landslide behind them in terms of taking the House and the Senate, that Donald Trump is not going to mention that person's name. That the person who Donald Trump is going to be calling out and pointing at and saying, hey, everybody, look over there, is the person that his internal polling, the Republican internal polling says, if this person is at the top of the ticket, it's going to be more likely that the Republicans will continue to control the Senate, may even gain control of the House, and that Trump could get reelected. Now, I could be completely wrong on that. I know the conventional wisdom right out there right now among the TV talking heads is that whoever Trump happens to be talking about, that's who he's afraid of. I don't think Trump is quite that stupid, although, you know, on various days he proves me wrong on that. But yeah,
well, there are a lot
and I think Liz Warren and Kamala Harris would be an absolute kick-ass ticket.
Yeah,
absolute kick-ass ticket. So, I'm sorry, Ron, you were going to say?
No, I just think you're right, and you know, we can only hope for the best. So.
Yeah, I'm with you. Richard in Evanston, Illinois. Hey, Richard, what's up?
Hi, I've got a. I was wanted to speak to the congressman, but I have a problem with. I want to have universal health care, and I'm hearing a bunch of different candidates, you know, having proposals. And I guess what I'd like to see happen, I mean, we hear it all the time, and there's a lot of other issues that this applies to. But I wonder if it's time to really be more concrete and have a product to sell, in a sense. In other words, the universal health care as a product. You have to sell everything nowadays, right?
That's what Medicare for All is.
Yeah, well, I was thinking that if the Democrats could only get together or use with think tanks, people that are into this one particular topic, and this applies to other topics, and come up with a concrete law, have the benefits of it summarized so that you could sell it to people. Because right now, all we're talking about it, and then we have a Booker's got a view, and a different plan. And I think this is never going to stop happening. We're never going to get it. We're just going to keep talking about it. It's time to sort of, since the Republicans get in the way of everything, it's time to try to govern as almost a shadow government and to start to take our ideas that work for the people, that the people accept, and come up with a product that they can get behind, which will propel us forward.
Yeah.
It not only
I agree, Richard, and I've been saying this for years, and that that we should have, that the Democrats should form a shadow government when the Republicans are in charge, and I agree that we need to package our individual proposals in ways that are simple and easy and easily understood, and I think that the Medicare for All right now kind of fits that qualification, but there are other programs that are just way too complicated. But I'm with you. I get it. Richard, thank you for the call. David in Broomfield, Colorado. What's up?
Yeah, I just want to say this president who, gave the money away, the taxes to the rich, and we talk about wealth inequality a lot as far as Bernie and some of the Democrats. But the term robber baron, I think, is more appropriate. And we have a president who likes barons so much that he named his son Baron.
Right. And he is a robber baron, and he represents the class of robber barons. I mean, the guy's a billionaire, or at least he says he is, and he certainly has done a great job of representing the billionaire class. He's screwing everybody else, but he's certainly representing the billionaire class well. David, thank you for the call. Spot on. We'll be back. Luke Vargas is going to check in with us in about 4 minutes and bring us up to date on what's going on in the world today. We missed his report in the second hour because of Congressman Khanna taking your calls for the hour. So we'll be back. Stick around.
You're listening to Thom Hartmann. Visit thomhartmann.com for audio and video archives.
We'll be back with Luke Vargas in just a minute. Report. And welcome back. Jack in Petaluma, California. Hey, Jack, thanks for watching Free Speech. What's on your mind today?
Yes, Tom. I listened last night to Chris Matthews' show on MSNBC.
Yeah, I caught the second half of it.
Yeah. Now, I want to explain that people from South America are not taking union jobs.
Yeah.
They're not. And I don't understand how the GOP, I come from Pennsylvania. I don't understand how they can keep on robbing people of work and blaming somebody else for it.
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right. I mean, the thing that I thought was really heartbreaking, and I was frankly astonished that Chris Matthews didn't point this out, because I know he knows this, is that the problem of falling wages, there were a number of people who got up at that town hall in Pennsylvania that Chris Matthews did yesterday, and basically said, you have to work 2 and 3 jobs now, even in these, quote, new factories, that are coming in. The reason for this is Taft-Hartley. In 1947, the right to unionize, had a giant hole kicked in the side of it with Taft-Hartley. It was a bill that Harry Truman vetoed, and the Republicans passed over his veto during that little 2-year window when they controlled Congress. And the Democrats, tragically, have not fought back and gotten it repealed. It should have been the only thing that they even thought about for the next 15 years, but it wasn't. And, Taft-Hartley allows individual states to say, we are going to, henceforth now, forevermore, world without end, amen, we are going to ignore the Wagner Act, the National Labor Relations Act of 1935, and, that legalized unions. We're going to ignore that. And the result, and every state that does that, whenever a state becomes a so-called right to work for less state, then what happens is everybody has the right to work for less. and not only that, you no longer have unions, who used to be one of the gatekeepers, essentially, to make sure that the people working there were at least U.S. citizens. So, nobody's enforcing those laws. So, yeah, I mean, it's just, it all goes back to that.
And that poor young girl on the show last night that has $160,000 student loan.
I missed that one. That's what, would she go to medical school or legal school, law school or something like that?
No, she went to a fashion school in New York.
Oh, geez. Yeah.
And do you realize when I left Pennsylvania, I had a home that cost me $28,000. Now, I moved to California because all the steel industry was shutting down because they absolutely drummed it in people's heads in Pennsylvania that steel was, the unions were putting people out of work.
Yeah.
And
well, that was Reagan's sales pitch, and it didn't make any sense to anybody who understood a union, but it sure did sound good to the Fox News rubes, I guess, for lack of a better phrase. Jack, thank you for the call. It was fascinating last night to watch that town hall. It was truly fascinating. Up next is Luke Vargas. He's going to fill us in on the goings-on of the day. In particular, the steel and aluminum tariffs in Mexico and Canada, and all kinds of interesting stuff. Stick around. We'll be right back. Every day here on the Thom Hartmann Program, Louise and I and our team, Sean, Nate, Shira, Dave, Chase, Sue, Nigel, Ron, we all work to put together the very, very best show we possibly can. And there's an enormous amount of work that goes into the show. And one of the things that comes out of that is a lot of content, a lot of specific information that we go through and we dig out and we want to share with you. And Sue puts that into our newsletter every week. And I think you will, if you don't already receive our newsletter, it comes in email every day, about an hour after we're off the air, or maybe a couple hours after we're off the air. And Sue goes through and pulls literally every link to every story that we talked about and puts it into the newsletter. It's free. We don't sell a list or anything. You complete safety and security. There's no charge. There's no nothing. Just plug in your email address over at thomhartmann.com. And you get signed up for the newsletter. It's all fairly obvious. You'll see it on the website. So check it out, thomhartmann.com. Thank you.
Want to connect with the show online? You can find the Thom Hartmann Program on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram.
Let's check in with Luke Vargas with Talk Media News and find out what's going on in the world today. This report brought to you by goatsfortheoldgoat.com and Loving What You Do, new book by Ellen Ratner. Luke is the chief foreign correspondent for Talk Media News, joins us from New York. He also does a 2-minute podcast every day, which plays on this program, and you can find in your favorite podcast places. Luke, the Trump administration has reportedly agreed to lift steel and aluminum tariffs on Mexico and Canada. What's going on with this, and does any of this have anything to do with the Russian-Ukrainian oligarch who's building an aluminum factory in Mitch McConnell's Kentucky?
I didn't hear about that. From what I can tell, this is not anything to do with that. This is sort of the end of the trade war with these countries, which, if you remember, kind of got pretty heated during the midst of the NAFTA 2.0 talks. Right. Trump imposed 25% steel tariffs on Canada and Mexico, along with other countries, too, and 10% on aluminum. And the way he did this was invoking this pretty rarely used 1962 law, which gives the president the power to sort of unilaterally slap tariffs on countries if he deems a certain product to be detrimental to U.S. national security interests. And a lot of people rolled their eyes at this at the time, saying, the U.S. and Canada and Mexico and Japan and other countries that got this are our allies. Of course, they would help us out in a wartime scenario with steel and aluminum. This is silly to invoke this, but he did it anyways. And I guess now the fact that all the countries have work this out is going to embolden him to do this again. So what they agreed to do today is that Canada and Mexico pledged they will take all sorts of measures to stop their domestic markets from being used as a gateway for cheap Chinese steel to enter the United States. Canada and Mexico also dropped retaliatory tariffs they imposed on us last year. And there's going to be a removal of quotas on all these products. So trade of steel and aluminum between the U.S. and these allies is going to go back to normal, and it's seen as a way of trying to get that USMCA trade deal ratified by all the parties. And just before I shift to our next topic, I'll say I think we're seeing signs from this that Trump, viewing the resolution of this U.S.-Canada-Mexico trade thing now as a success, him getting kind of everything he wanted, despite raising tensions so much with those national security tariffs. Looks like he's going to do that again on automobiles, though technically the news today is that there's going to be a 6-month delay in threatened automobile tariffs on the European Union and Japan. The New York Times reports the reason for the delay is not because President Trump doesn't believe that going down that road is wise. It's that there's too many other things going on right now with the China trade talks. But it looks like, Japan and the European Union are going to probably be slapped with those auto tariffs, and that is something the U.S. Chamber of Commerce is freaking out about. They put out a statement today saying this is injecting so much unnecessary uncertainty into the economy. But again, Trump sees, I think, the way that the Canada-Mexico thing worked out, and it validates his initial strategy.
Well, this has been his entire business strategy, his entire life. Break things, yell, scream, threaten, and finally, when often breaking things that aren't even broken. And then when you get your way, then you claim victory.
Exactly.
I mean, yeah, it's amazing. The UN there's a new UN report out saying that feminizing these digital assistants, Siri and Alexa, is dangerous or has a risk associated with it. I get the kind of cultural convention of that, essentially, defining an assistant as being female. Kind of reminds me of back in the 70s, one of the first businesses I owned. First time I put a help wanted ad, I think it was in '72, help wanted ad in the paper, called up the newspaper, and their first question was, do you want it under men wanted or women wanted? And I said, I want, we're looking for a secretary for our office. And they were like, oh, that's women wanted. And so it went in there, and we ended up hiring a man, a young guy named Bill, who was a student at MSU. But the ad was in the women wanted section. But is that what they're talking about, or is this something else?
That's exactly right. So let's say very first why this is relevant. According to the UN, digital audio searches using a vocal assistant now are 1 in 5 searches on the internet, and by next year that will be 1 in 2. So basically, the internet is being rewired in a very short period of time from a conventional sort of text-based format to one that is much more conversational.
Is this because of the proliferation of smart speakers?
Yeah. In fact, by 2021, there will be more voice-activated smart assistants than people on Earth. So that's exciting. And everyone, Alexa, Amazon, Siri, Microsoft, which has Cortana, they're all young female voices. And the companies back this up by saying, well, it's what people want. There's a preference for female voices. And they seem to have ignored any concerns about the gender bias this reinforces. Male voices are seen as more authoritative. Female voices are seen as more cooperative and supportive, which these businesses like because, in any case, they're trying to drive people to a purchase. So having a female, sort of move you towards that purchase is seen as quite smart. Why it matters, the early coding of these programs is really important to determining whether they reinforce stereotypes. I see that we're running out of time, so I'll be very quick. But where it gets more concerning is that the speech of these assistants is female and sends this signal, the UN says, that women are obliging, docile, and eager to please. And research from USC finds that use of virtual assistants produces a rise in command-based speech directed at women outside of the digital realm. It serves as this socialization tool, especially for children.
Largely men or by men and women?
By men and women, but particularly for men, that hard codes a connection between a woman's voice and subservience. And then we have all these concerns about verbal abuse and tolerance of sexual harassment. Read more by searching UN, UNESCO, and voice assistants. It's fascinating.
Fascinating stuff. Luke Fargus with Talk Media News and a great podcast. Luke, thanks a lot.
Thank you, Tom.
Good talking with you. And thank you so much for being with us this week. And a tip of the hat, many thanks again to Jefferson Smith for filling in on the 2 days that I was out with a stomach flu or whatever it was. So glad to be back and so glad that Jefferson was able to fill in and that we have such extraordinary talent here in Portland that could do it. Thanks so much for being with us. And don't forget, democracy is not a spectator sport. It requires all of us. So get out there, get active, tag, you're it. We'll see you on Monday. Have a great weekend.
You've been listening to Thom Hartmann. For audio and video archives, visit thomhartmann.com.
We say fight back!